Chapter 483. The reason why the three primordial worlds were referred to as primordial was that this was the only word that could describe them. The difference between the three worlds and the Hun chaos was that they barely formed land, mountains, and rivers. Seriously speaking, they were only an uneven Hun chaos. The reason why they were referred to as worlds was because they clearly contained time and space, and they were also giving off an aura that only heaven and earth could give off. After the three worlds appeared at the center of the island, it was as if they were suppressing all of the worlds in the universe. The island, as well as the space in a radius of tens of millions of kilometers around it, seemed to have been suppressed by an indescribable power. Even the flow of the world's origin energy and air were restricted, and it was as if the three worlds would be able to take control of everything at any time and cause the same changes to occur. The disciples of the three gods sect within this area felt as if they had returned to their mother's womb, and an extremely safe, warm, and intimate feeling filled their minds. The various powers that they had painstakingly cultivated within their bodies had become more than 10 times more lively than in the past. In the past, many of the places that couldn't be reached seemed to have been cultivated for countless years, and they were now able to be easily reached by the various powers. So it turns out that the three sect masters have created such a method in the past 100 years. Our three deities sect will finally have a method to protect the sect and achieve the Tao. The time for us to soar has finally arrived. This sigh was like a giant hand that tore through the fog in front of everyone's eyes. The disciples of the three gods sect, who were originally only feeling joyful and intimate, but were unable to tell where this joy and intimacy came from, were suddenly enlightened, and they finally understood what was going on. At the same time, many beings who weren't disciples of the three gods sect also instantly understood what the song from the center of the island meant. All of a sudden, countless praises, admiration, and astonishment rang out in the hearts of all of the beings present. The three worlds above the center of the island rippled slightly, revealing the mysterious and mellow aura to the world for a long time. After a few minutes, they trembled slightly and dispersed into three mysterious forces that sank down and returned to the main hall at the center of the island. As the three worlds dispersed into three forces, the mysterious force that had enveloped the island and the tens of millions of kilometers around it instantly disappeared. All of the world's origin energy and powers regained their autonomy, as if they were once again under the control of the supreme great Tao of the primordial world. However, the hearts of the disciples of the three gods sect that were filled with safety, warmth, and intimacy didn't completely disappear. Instead, they were still faintly present. It was as if they had a home to return to, and a place that they could return to after being busy. All of the true disciples of the three gods sect can come to the main hall to learn the three sect-defining techniques that we've created. At this moment, all of the beings on the island heard such a voice ringing in their ears. The voice was leisurely and calm, and the tone was gentle and pleasing to the ear. It didn't have any bewitching power, but it made people involuntarily remember it in the depths of their divine souls, and they would never be willing to forget it for the rest of their lives. The three gods sect had 108 true disciples, and each of them had the cultivation of crossing disaster realm. The strongest true disciple only needed the last bit of enlightenment to transcend the heavenly tribulation and attain the Tao. Hearing the voice, the 108 true disciples were indescribably delighted. Under the envious gazes of the many inner and outer disciples, they turned into rays of light and flew from all over the island, landing in the main hall at the center of the island. The three sect-defining cultivation techniques were actually created based on Tao Master Luo Fan's Tao Fruit Great Tao. The three sect masters of the three gods sect are indeed geniuses. It seems that the matter of joining the three gods sect can't be delayed any longer. On an island not far away, a man floating in the clouds was thinking deeply. Around this man, there are several male women who also have a pensive look on their faces. These people were one of the 48,000 men. The 3,000 Great Tao and the 48,000 men were organizations formed during the demon-killing war. Its function was to integrate the forces during the demon-killing war, so that the demon-killing cultivators could display stronger combat power and better destroy the demon-killing war. The reason why it could transcend the virtual world and become a real organization in the real world of the untainted land was that many demon-killing cultivators had formed a deep friendship during the demon-killing war and were unwilling to separate. It was precisely because of this that the 3,000 Great Tao and the 48,000 men were much weaker in restricting the members of the organization than during the demon-killing war. What's more, because they did not create many cultivation techniques like the men's sects to allow their members to achieve Tao, many demon-killing cultivators wanted to join some of the men's sects to obtain Tao attainment. Just like these women, there were many people in the huge lake who had the same idea. After the 108 true disciples of the three deities sect stepped into the teaching hall, they found that there were 3 stone steels at the center of the teaching hall that were 100,000 feet tall and as wide as a cliff. The method inheritance hall had clearly been refined. Although it was not as big as the hall that Zun Luan and the other 2 were in, it still had many mysteries. As a result, the 3 stone tablets, which were clearly many times larger than the hall, were strangely contained by the hall. Anyone who stepped into the method inheritance hall would feel a vast aura the moment they stepped in, and they would involuntarily feel a sense of respect. The 3 stone tablets were densely recorded with countless patterns. These words and patterns were extremely profound. Although they were all clearly recorded on the stone tablets, all the true disciples only felt that they were blurry when they looked at them. They knew that they could even recognize the strokes of the words, but they could not truly understand them. They could not even truly remember them in their souls. It was as if there was too much information contained within them, far beyond what they could accept. These 3 stone tablets record the cultivation principles of the 3 sections. Not only do they contain the fundamental cultivation methods that lead straight to the primordial world, but they also contain the 3,000 divine abilities and techniques that have been derived from them. If one's Tao heart isn't pure, they won't be able to bear the information contained in them. All of you can purify your Tao heart here and comprehend it well. Zun Luan's voice leisurely entered the ears of the 108 true disciples. When the true disciples heard this voice, they hurriedly bowed towards the void to express their gratitude. Then, they sat down cross-legged and began to purify their Tao hearts. They worked hard to comprehend the sect's cultivation techniques recorded on the stone tablet. These true disciples were able to stand out among hundreds of thousands of their peers and become true disciples. They were naturally people with peerless aptitudes and pure Tao hearts. Before long, there were disciples who had purified their Tao hearts to comprehend the requirements of the stone tablet. They broke through the mist and saw the techniques recorded on the stone tablet. Chapter 484. While these true disciples were gradually comprehending the techniques recorded on the 3 stone steels, a different scene was taking place in the great hall at the center of the 3 motherly island, which served as the residence of the 3 tree Luans. Golden, silver, and white lights filled the entire great hall. 3 human silhouettes took the place of Ji Luan and the other 2. These 3 phantoms seemed to be illusory, but they constantly emitted an indescribable aura of reality. It was so much so that when people saw these 3 phantoms, they would instantly be able to visualize the figures of 3 beautiful women in their mind. The golden, silver, and white lights were constantly trembling and expanding, as if they were transmitting some kind of indescribable message, seeking something indescribably wonderful from some mysterious place. After a long time, the lights gradually faded. The 3 human silhouettes gradually returned to their true forms. They were Shun Luan, Tian Yi, and Lu Xia. However, compared to 100 years ago, their auras had undergone an earth-shattering change. 100 years ago, anyone who saw them would naturally recognize them as innate gods. Even if they were newly born innate gods, they would naturally be categorized as one. They wouldn't think that the three of them were the same as other innate gods. There was a huge difference. But now it was different. Now, anyone who stepped into the Great Hall and saw the three of them would feel as if they were facing three different worlds. It was as if the one sitting above were not three living beings or three women, but three boundless supreme existences that contained boundless power, and each and every one of their actions contained boundless wondrous techniques. At this time, any innate god was so tiny in front of them. In front of them, they were so small and insignificant that it was impossible to compare them with the other innate gods. Equivalent. I finally feel how profound Teacher's realm is, Shunluan, who sat in the center, sighed. Exactly. We spent 100 years and borrowed the power of the formation, but we only managed to deduce the cultivation method before the itinerant immortal stage. Back then, Teacher only needed a thought to create a supreme cultivation method that allowed us to cultivate to the golden immortal stage. Tian-Yi sighed as well. When Lu Xia heard this, she smiled and said, "Elder sisters, at the very least, we can already sense the profundity of our teacher. Isn't this a huge improvement for us?" Third sister is right. Back then, we only knew that Teacher was unfathomable, but we didn't know how profound he was. Now that we can feel a little of it, it is indeed something worth celebrating, Shunluan said with a smile. Although the three of them spoke in a normal tone and did not use any power, the moment they spoke, it naturally caused the yuan qi in the entire hall to fluctuate subtly. The light and shadow in the hall also changed, as if the entire world had inexplicably changed with the change of their words. To Shunluan, Tian-Yi, and Lu Xia, spending 100 years to deduce and create the sex cultivation method was an extremely huge and difficult challenge. It almost exhausted all the wisdom they had accumulated over the past hundreds of thousands of years. It made them feel fatigue and hardships that they had never felt since they were born. But at the same time, the process was extremely beneficial to the three of them. At this moment, Shunluan and the other two had firmly stepped into the perfected immortal stage. Among them, Shunluan had even reached the peak of the perfected immortal stage. She only needed one last opportunity to comprehend some abstruse technique to break through the perfected immortal stage and become a golden immortal. Tian-Yi and Lu Xia were slightly inferior to Shunluan, but they were definitely not ordinary itinerant immortal stage innate gods. They could not be compared. Shunluan, Tian-Yi, and Lu Xia were not born in the same place. Instead, they only discovered each other after they were summoned to the space-time illusion. After tens of thousands of years, they formed a deep friendship. They even snatched away many innate gods. After that, they became sisters because they were in the same boat. Thus, even though their original cultivation methods were quite profound, they were not the same. Furthermore, they were not categorized into cultivation systems like the Tao Fruit Great Tao, the Essence Soul Great Tao, the Golden Core Great Tao, the Pattern Great Tao, and the Talisman Great Tao. Although Luo Fan had praised these three cultivation systems back then, it was obvious that they could not compare to the Tao Fruit Great Tao. Originally, they were very confident in their own cultivation method. They did not think that their cultivation methods would be inferior to other cultivation methods. However, after they became Luo Fan's disciples, they were not taken in as disciples by Luo Fan because they did not cultivate the Tao Fruit Great Tao. They could only be in such an awkward position. From then on, they realized how huge the gap between their cultivation methods and the Tao Fruit Great Tao was. After that, they deeply felt the gap between them and Luo Fan's disciples. However, their foundations had already been established. Even if they knew how huge the gap between their cultivation methods and the Tao Fruit Great Tao was, they could not change their cultivation method. They could only watch as they were filled with eternal regret. Under the influence of this regret, the three of them tried their best to combine their cultivation methods when they deduced and created the cultivation methods of their sections. They used everything they had to create a cultivation method that was similar to the Tao Fruit Great Tao. Perhaps it was because they were gifted by the heavens, or perhaps it was because they were lucky, or perhaps it was because they had great karmic luck, but after 100 years of hard work and practically exhausting all their wisdom, they finally created these 3 scriptures. They condensed boundless energy and communicated with the supreme grand Tao in the unseen world, forming a primitive heaven and earth that acted as the source of energy, life, and soul. Although this cultivation method could not compare to the Tao fruit Great Tao, it surpassed the primordial spirit Great Tao, golden core Great Tao, pattern Great Tao, and talisman Great Tao. It created another cultivation method that directly connected to the origin of the Great Tao. Moreover, because this cultivation method was created by combining the cultivation methods of the 3 of them, its origin was the cultivation method of the 3 of them. As a result, after the Great Tao of the world was created, the power in their bodies naturally transformed from the originally pure power that had lost its profoundness into the origin power needed by the Great Tao of the world. It directly changed their souls, bodies, and life origin to form the primordial world. The reason why the primordial world and origin power were different was because the 3 of them had originally cultivated different cultivation method. As a result, the origin power after the transformation would be different. As a result, the origin power would be different. Of course, this difference was only in the direction of the power, and there was no difference in the fundamentals. Even if one cultivated it to the end, there would still be no difference. The 3 stone steels in the technique imparting hall recorded the cultivation methods of Shun Luan, Tian Yi, and Lu Xia. In the end, they cultivated 3 different primordial worlds, as well as the various divine abilities and Dharma arts that came with these 3 different cultivation methods. However, since the Great Tao of the world was newly created, the stone tablets only recorded the itinerant immortal realm. Chapter 485. According to Luo Fan's Tao fruit, the itinerant immortal realm and the perfected immortal realm were just 2 levels of the same realm. They were both earth immortal Tao fruits, so the difference was not too great. However, in reality, the difference between the itinerant immortal realm and the perfected immortal realm had reached an indescribable level. Although the great Tao of heaven and earth could only be cultivated to the itinerant immortal realm, and the true disciples of the 3 deities sect were all at the crossing disaster realm, such a cultivation method was enough for the true disciples to cultivate for tens of thousands of years. Tens of thousands of years was not long, but it was not short either. At least, it was enough for the 3 of them to perfect the great Tao of heaven and earth to the perfected immortal realm. They might even be able to create the cultivation method of the golden immortal realm with some fortuitous encounters. Therefore, the creation of the great Tao of heaven and earth meant that the 3 deities sect would be passed down forever. The foundation of the primordial world had been established. After the creation of the great Tao of heaven and earth, many living beings in the primordial world seemed to have woken up from a dream. They finally found a path to the supreme great Tao amidst their confusion. For a time, countless rays of light came from all over the primordial world to 3 Mother Island. 3 Mother Island became extremely lively in the following 100 years. The number of disciples under the 3 deities sect skyrocketed. The number of disciples under the 3 deities sect increased by 10 times in the past 100 years. Although the number of true disciples only increased by 100, the aptitudes of these true disciples were rather shocking. There were even 3 innate gods among them. They were not postnatal living beings. From this, it could be seen how beneficial the creation of the great Tao of heaven and earth was to the 3 deities sect. Now was the beginning of the primordial world. The evolution of the primordial chi was still in the process of evolving from chaotic primordial chi to connate primordial chi. Apart from a small portion of chaotic primordial chi, the entire world was filled with endless connate primordial chi that filled the world. There was no need to say much about chaotic primordial chi. It was tainted with the aura of chaos and contained infinite power. It could even evolve all kinds of power. It was a supreme source of primordial qi of high quality. Although connate primordial qi was formed from chaotic primordial qi, it was inferior to chaotic primordial qi in terms of quality. However, it was also an extremely mysterious type of yuan qi. All living beings in the primordial world, regardless of whether they were connate or postnatal beings, as long as they breathed in the connate primordial qi, they would be able to replenish their bodies and souls at any time. In other words, as long as any living being could breathe this connate yuan qi, they would not have to worry about their lifespan ending. In other words, as long as the primordial world was filled with endless connate vitality, even the floating monsters that should have been born and died would be able to live for thousands of years. Their bodies and souls would never die. How could such a situation affect the innate gods that were naturally born in the primordial world? To them, it was common sense. However, in the eyes of the many post-celestial beings that had ascended from the small world, this was a great benefit. It was proof that this primordial world was a supreme immortal realm. After all, there were only a few living beings who could see through the evolution of the primordial world's primordial qi. For most living beings, even the majority of innate gods? In other words, the primordial energy in the primordial world would not change. It was even more impossible for the boundless innate yuan qi to disappear. As long as they were not destroyed by external forces, they would live forever. However, he did not know that the connate essence energy in the primordial world would continue to evolve over time. In the end, it would completely change from connate to postnatal, and in the end, it would turn into postnatal essence energy that no longer had such a special ability. Only a very small number of innate gods? Only a small number of people with extraordinary intelligence could comprehend this process and feel fear in their hearts. It was precisely because of this reason that even though there were countless connate and postnatal living beings in the primordial world that had stepped foot on the path of cultivation to seek the Tao, only a very small number of them did so for the sake of obtaining an immortal lifespan. Instead, they only wanted to obtain countless divine abilities and Dharma arts. They wanted to possess great power, be able to change the heavens and the earth, be able to move mountains and drain oceans, and be able to live freely in this dangerous primordial world. It was the same for all the living beings who had entered the Three Gods sect. The reason why the great Tao of heaven and earth created by the three deities sect is sought after by many living beings, apart from the fundamental cultivation method that leads straight to the itinerant immortal realm, the most important thing is that each cultivation method comes with 3,000 sets of magical powers and incantations. There are many innate gods in the primordial world. These innate gods? Almost every single one of them naturally comprehended their own unique cultivation method. Although most of them could obtain Luo Fan's guidance and perfect their own cultivation method, Luo Fan would not do everything. He would at most perfect their fundamental cultivation method. As for the matching divine abilities and Dharma arts, they naturally had to rely on these innate gods. They perfected it themselves. As for the innate gods, everyone has their own merit. The divine abilities and Dharma arts that they created naturally have their strengths and weaknesses. Some have more, some have fewer. It is impossible for them to form a perfect and complete system. Precisely because of this, in the past, in the primordial world, apart from the various divine abilities and Dharma arts that Luo Fan had passed down, there was almost no complete divine abilities and Dharma arts system that could cover everything. Only when the Three Gods sect's great Tao of heaven and earth was created did this situation change. In the eyes of the three of them, the 3,000 divine abilities and Dharma arts of the great Tao of heaven and earth could only unleash a small portion of the endless mysteries of the great Tao of heaven and earth. It could only be considered a preliminary creation. It could not be said to cover everything, nor could it be said to be perfect. However, compared to other innate and acquired life forms, this was already something that no one had ever thought of before. It could be said to cover all aspects, and it was sufficient to broaden their horizons by 1,000 times. It was sufficient to increase the might they could display at the same cultivation level by 1,000 times. Precisely because of this, when the true disciples of the Three Gods sect left the teaching hall and displayed their strength for the first time, the Three Gods sect instantly suppressed the 108 men's sects created by the many itinerant cultivators of the primordial world, as well as the 3,000 great Daos and 48,000 other men. In just a short 100 years, they almost became the second holy land in the entire primordial world, apart from Buzhou Mountain. This change caused great damage to the other men's sects and organizations, but it was also a great stimulus. Fortunately, the many living beings in the primordial world had not experienced enough danger in the human world. They were still considered simple. Therefore, although the achievements of the Three Gods sect had damaged and stimulated them, they did not have the thought of gathering together to erase the Three Gods sect. They only painstakingly swore to create an even more profound cultivation method that could compare to the great Tao of heaven and earth, and snatch back the many disciples. For a time, the primordial world was enveloped in a thick aura of creation. After more than 200 years of evolution, the new changes in the primordial world after the great tribulation of heaven and earth gradually appeared in front of the countless living beings. Chapter 486. During the great tribulation of heaven and earth, through various mysterious methods, the primordial world absorbed the essence of countless otherworldly demons and enriched the Supreme Great Tao. Under the effect of the Supreme Great Tao that had been enriched, countless living beings that originally did not exist in the primordial world gradually appeared in the primordial world over the past 200 years. There was a three-legged, white-headed, human-faced Chu-Ru, a sheep-like, red-haired deaf, a red-haired leopard with 5 tails and horns, and so on. All kinds of strange life forms were born everywhere in the primordial world, and they formed tribes at an extremely fast speed, occupying more and more vast primordial world. Although the various living beings that were naturally born in the primordial world, they were not innate gods. The innate gods that were born in the primordial world? They were fundamentally different. Innate gods? They were favored by the primordial world. When they were born, they possessed a connate aura. Their souls and aptitudes were earth-shattering. They only needed a thought, a hint, and they could easily enter the Tao. They could comprehend all kinds of incredible mystical abilities and techniques and possess all kinds of unfathomable power. They were rare embryos in the world. On the other hand, the countless creatures that had been born in the past 200 years were just wild beasts. Although they were naturally born in the untainted world and possessed various instinctive abilities and divine sense, almost none of them were born with complete intelligence, nor did they have any innate aura. Most of them only had instincts left in their bodies, and they only knew how to survive in the untainted world. The birth of so many living beings caused the danger of the entire primordial world to increase by more than 100 times. Although it was still a short time, and it could not be seen, it could be predicted that from now on, the survival of the fittest in the primordial world would be more than 100 times stronger than before. If he could not cultivate powerful mystical abilities and only knew how to muddle along, thinking that his body and soul would not be damaged by the passage of time, he would one day die in the mouth of some strange beast. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 3,000 years had passed. After the great tribulation of heaven and earth, the development trend of the primordial world had been carried forward in the 3,000 years. At that moment, the number of living beings in the primordial world had reached an indescribable level. The entire primordial world was filled with beasts. A vast and wild aura filled the world. The roars of the beasts reverberated throughout the world other than the innate gods. The active areas were all occupied by those strange beasts. In just a short period of time, in the eyes of the many living beings in the primordial world, the power structure in the entire primordial world had been reversed. The innate God who originally occupied the main body of the primordial world, and the post-celestial beings who had ascended from the small worlds became the vulnerable group. Of course, this didn't mean that during these 3,000 years the innate God, the strength of the Hoteon lifeforms did not improve. On the contrary, during these 3,000 years the numerous innate gods, the overall strength of the Hoteon lifeforms had increased by at least 10,000 times. 3,000 years ago, the three sisters of the Three Gods sect had first combined their cultivation methods with the great Tao that Luo Fan had taught to create the great Tao of heaven and earth, allowing the Three Gods sect to become the #1 sect in the primordial world. It allowed the Three Mother Island to become the second holy land in the primordial world, apart from Buzhou Mountain. After that, many other sects and organizations received enlightenment. They mobilized all their wisdom and worked together to create one mysterious, perfect, and complete cultivation method after another. They could cultivate great mystical abilities and unfathomable power. These cultivation methods had different foundations. Some were deep, while others were shallow. In the end, their cultivation achievements varied. Among them, only a few could form a great Tao that was comparable to the great Tao of heaven and earth. However, the appearance of these various cultivation methods changed the original cultivation state of the entire primordial world. It made the cultivation methods of the entire primordial world become orderly. At the same time, it also became stronger. The Three Gods sect still stood at the peak of the cultivation world of the entire primordial world. Its fundamental cultivation method, the great Tao of heaven and earth, was unfathomable. It was many times more perfect than it was 3,000 years ago. Not only had the cultivation method of the perfected immortal realm been perfected, but the matching great Tao had also increased to 48,000. Of course, after 3,000 years, there were only 365 types of irreplaceable and indispensable great Tao. However, it was not too exaggerated. With the existence of such a great Tao, one could imagine the strength of the Three Gods sect. At this time, there were already 3,000 true disciples. Half of them had already broken through the limit of the heavenly lifespan realm and reached the itinerant immortal realm. Further down, there were tens of thousands of inner disciples and millions of outer disciples. However, these were not things that the three sisters were happy about. What made them the most happy was that 3,000 years ago, there were only a few connate gods among the true disciples. There were already hundreds of them. Connate gods who taught the Tao? Connate gods who had lost Pangu's primordial spirit? To be able to step onto the path of seeking the Tao and obtain the opportunity to achieve the Tao, they had already stabilized the great fortune they occupied. This was the final goal of the three sisters when they founded the Three Gods sect. This change meant that the development of the Three Gods sect was on the right path. How could they not be happy about this? Apart from the Three Gods sect, there were also 18 other sects that stood at the peak of the cultivation world. Due to the different nature of the cultivation methods, these 18 sects divided all the cultivation sects and organizations in the primordial world into 5 camps: Realm, Chi, God, Artifact, and Dharma. Realm was the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was the fusion of one's soul, body, and power into one place. In the end, it would open up a primitive, single-pole, multi-pole, or illusory world. Using it to achieve the Tao, one would finally obtain unimaginable power and seek the supreme great Tao. The representative was the Three Gods sect. Qi was the great Tao of true Qi. This great Tao was no less profound than the great Tao of heaven and earth. It looked at the boundless chaos, everything in the world, and all the worlds in the universe as manifestations of this aura. The goal of cultivation was to cultivate the connate origin true Qi in one's body, attach it to the soul, fuse with the laws, and change the rules. In the end, one had to use this connate origin true Qi to recreate the primordial world and reshape the world. There were 3 representatives: the Sky Mountain sect, the Myriad Qi sect, and the Hun Yuan men. Chapter 487. Gods were the great ways of gods. This kind of great way of cultivation was different from other kinds of primordial spirit great ways. It could even be said to be the complete opposite. The primordial spirit great way of cultivation strived to transcend the natural limitations of the human body. Through endless effort, one could finally cultivate into a connate Taoist body, and then use this connate Taoist body to seek the supreme great way. The cultivation method of the Great Path of Gods, however, was created based on the body of an innate god. If Luo Fan had created an ordinary human to cultivate, he would have to rely on all kinds of mysterious methods to change and refine his body. In the end, he would abandon his original connate Taoist body and change his body into an existence similar to that of connate gods. In this way, he would obtain all kinds of supernatural powers and infinite strength of connate gods. If he could cultivate this method to the end, he could even break the world and live forever. Although it was different from the primordial spirit great way of cultivation, it was not much less mysterious than the great way of genuine Qi and the great way of heaven and earth. Moreover, because there were many sects of cultivation, there were many cultivation methods based on this great way. Some were even hundreds or thousands of times more powerful than the great way of heaven and earth and the great way of genuine Qi. This gave many living beings a variety of choices. It also made this great way of cultivation the most popular and most living beings in the untainted land. Connate gods were naturally born in the untainted land. They were born with some kind of inexplicable connection with the untainted land. They were born with all kinds of incredible supernatural powers. However, these supernatural powers were innate and could only improve with the passage of time. Moreover, because they were rooted in the body instincts, ordinary connate gods could not perfectly control them. This great way of gods gathered the supreme wisdom of many connate gods. Although it imitated the body of connate gods, it developed all kinds of connate gods' supernatural powers and supernatural powers to the limit. With the supernatural powers and supernatural powers of connate gods as the foundation, it created countless derivative spells that could exert power far beyond the supernatural powers that connate gods could control instinctively. It was because of this development that the Great Way of Gods could reach a level comparable to the Great Way of genuine Qi and the Great Way of heaven and earth. Among the top 18 peak sects there were 10. They were the representatives of this Great Way of God. Because they cultivated the Great Way of Gods, they were also called divine sect. Among the remaining hundreds of sects, there were a total of 72 sects whose cultivation methods belonged to the Great Tao of the Gods. Therefore, it could be said that the Great Tao of Gods occupied the absolute mainstream in the primordial world. In comparison, the popularity of the other four camps was much inferior. Among the 5 major cultivation factions, the Tao of the Sword, the Tao of the Saber, the Tao of the Spear, and so on. Among them, the one with the greatest achievements was the Heavenly Sword Men, which was formerly known as the Heavenly Sword sect. This sect cultivated the Tao of the Sword, and they could use the sword to cultivate supreme divine abilities. When cultivated to the peak, they could destroy billions of worlds with a single sword, break through the shackles of fate with a single sword, and finally achieve eternity. The cultivators of the artifact faction were the most complicated, and the differences between their cultivation methods were also the greatest. Some cultivators in this camp disdained other magic tools and weapons, such as a sword, a spear, or a saber, which were necessary for their own cultivation. They were even unwilling to share any of their energy with other things that were necessary for their cultivation, such as refining magic tools and alchemy. However, some of them were well versed in all kinds of celestial artifacts and weapons. They wanted to try anything that was beneficial to cultivation, be it alchemy, refining weapons, martial arts cultivation methods, sabers, spears, swords, or halberds. They were not picky at all. As long as they found a chance, they would dabble in them. Apart from the 18 peak sects, there were also some sects that specialized in refining weapons and alchemy. They wanted to use these methods to obtain eternal life and earth-shattering divine abilities. It could be said that this faction was the most complicated and contradictory among the 5 major cultivation factions. Apart from the 4 major cultivation factions, the last cultivation faction was Dharma. The cultivators of this faction specialized in divine abilities and did not cultivate the body or the soul. They simply absorbed the foundation of a certain divine ability into their body and used all methods to strengthen it, allowing it to develop to its peak. In the end, they would cultivate it into a perfect, mysterious existence with its own consciousness. Then, they would refine their own body and soul into it, replacing their own body and soul with this mysterious existence, turning it into a brand new self. If they could cultivate this method to its peak, they would be able to turn this mysterious existence into an existence similar to rules and laws. Because of this, they would obtain supreme power that could destroy the world. From then on, they would live as long as the world, shine as the sun and moon, and coexist with the universe. This faction was so extreme, but it was also because of this extremely short period of time that they could pour all their strength and wisdom into a divine ability or a spell. Compared to the other 4 factions, even the artifact faction's swordsmanship was more focused and purer. As a result, the cultivation method of this faction was relatively easier to cultivate, and the speed of improvement was rather impressive. In addition, in the current situation where the primordial world was filled with endless connate essence chi, the cultivators of this camp had endless time to cultivate. They did not need to worry about the damage to their bodies and souls, but they would be able to cultivate it one day. As a result, this camp was also quite popular. There were many cultivators who joined it, and their numbers were even second to the great Tao of gods. Among the 18 peak male sects, other than the 3 gods sect, Hun Yuan men, Heavenly Mountain sect, Myriad Chi sect, Heavenly Sword men, and the 10 divine sects, the remaining 3 male sects belonged to this cultivation camp. Apart from the 18 peak male sects, there were also dozens of male sects that belonged to this cultivation camp. The 5 cultivation camps stood in the primordial world. They did not form a strict organization for men, but because their cultivation methods were similar, there were naturally many groups. After thousands of years of development, they naturally formed their own circles, allowing the 5 camps to truly take shape. As for other than the 5 camps, there were naturally many other cultivation methods. However, they were not mainstream. It was unknown when they would be lost, but there was no need to waste time. Over the past 3,000 years, because of the appearance of the 5 cultivation camps, the strength of the cultivators in the entire primordial world had increased by a lot. Although the cultivators were at a disadvantage because the number of beasts that were naturally produced in the primordial world after the great tribulation of heaven and earth was too large, relatively speaking, the cultivators who had perfected their cultivation methods had a better understanding of the primordial world than 3,000 years ago. The range of activity was not limited to the surroundings of Buzhou Mountain and the huge lake. Instead, it covered almost every part of the primordial world. Even the boundless sea around it had traces of many cultivators' activities. This was not difficult to understand. Although the primordial world was so vast that even ordinary innate gods could not cross it after flying for tens of thousands of years, Luo Fan had sent the 100,000 innate gods to various parts of the primordial world with the help of mysterious mystical abilities. After the great tribulation of heaven and earth, although the number of innate gods guarding various parts of the primordial world had decreased by a large amount, there were still many left. Through the connection of the virtual world, with the various mysterious mystical abilities that had been created for thousands of years, and with the help of the innate gods in various parts of the primordial world, it was naturally not difficult for many cultivators to cross the geographical gap. Chapter 488. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Edited by Micure. On this day, in the center of the untainted land, in an area known as the Linghai Province, 6 rays of light streaked across the sky and landed at the edge of a valley that was filled with liquid connate vitality. Due to the expansion of the living being's range of activity, the situation where the entire untainted land was only divided by direction in the past would naturally not happen again. Naturally, there were many interested living beings who gave various names to the various regions. The division of the regions was even simpler. Back then, Luo Fan had divided the untainted land into 129,600 regions. That was already the most profound division, and it even conformed to some profound principles. What other division could compare to this method of division? As for the Linghai province, it was one of the 129,600 regions that Luo Fan had divided up. Although the Linghai province was only one of the 129,600 provinces in the untainted land, it was so vast that it had reached an unimaginable level. Any connate god would need to fly at full speed for hundreds or thousands of years to cross the distance. Although this valley was millions of miles wide, it was only a drop in the ocean compared to the entire Linghai province. However, the entire Linghai province was named after this valley. The connate vitality in the valley was condensed like a liquid. Because the valley was surrounded by mountains, it could not flow away, but it formed a boundless ocean. In this ocean lived 4 types of strange beasts. They were the Kuei ox, the hidden infant, the barking wu, and the black locust. It was also because of the existence of these 4 types of strange beasts that the valley became famous in the untainted land. The spirit sea in the valley directly named the entire province. These 4 types of strange beasts occupied more than half of the 8 connate thunder beasts in the untainted land. Apart from these 4 types of connate thunder beasts, the remaining 4 types of connate thunder beasts were not too far from here. They were only in a boundless forest about 3 billion miles away. They were the striking wood, the fate lotus, the neon leaf, and the sequoia. These 8 connate thunder beasts each naturally controlled a type of special thunder. In terms of power, although it was quite impressive, it was seriously considered nothing. However, for cultivation gods? 4 cultivators of the great Tao, these 8 connate thunder beasts had a completely different meaning. God? The great Tao was about changing one's body, changing one's original body into an extremely powerful one that possessed all sorts of innate abilities and abilities. When it was first formed, the only reference point was the innate God. But following God? The development of Tao was only based on a single innate God? If he were to cultivate, his final achievement would definitely be comparable to the innate gods? Under the same conditions, under the same perfect use of the innate divine ability, innate supernatural ability, and under the same condition of the same level of cultivation. Thus, the intelligent cultivators were unwilling to give up and started to think of ways to create something that could surpass the innate gods. His own cultivation method came out. In the end, they cast their gazes towards the countless mutated beasts that had appeared at an unimaginable speed in the primordial world over the past 3,000 years. It was under such circumstances that the 8 connate lightning beasts caught their attention. The 8 connate lightning beasts happened to be flowers, grass, trees, insects, fish, birds, and beasts. These 8 categories could cover all living beings in the world. In addition, they had the same kind of innate abilities. This caused a subtle and mysterious connection between the 8 connate lightning beasts. It was precisely because of the subtle and mysterious connection between the 8 connate lightning beasts that some experts of the divine sect combined the 8 connate lightning beasts. The cultivation method of the great Tao had almost surpassed all the gods. The cultivation method of the great Tao was the Son of Lightning. Although the Son of Lightning was created based on the 8 connate lightning beasts, as long as he cultivated it, he would be more than 10,000 times stronger than the 8 thunder beasts. If he cultivated it to the peak, he would even be able to control the true meaning of lightning in the primordial world. He would be able to control the might of lightning on behalf of the heavens and control all lightning. The person who created the cultivation method of the Son of Lightning was an elder of the Heavenly Thunder sect. It was also because of the creation of the cultivation method of the Son of Lightning that the Heavenly Thunder sect, which could only be considered a third-rate cultivation sect, became one of the 18 peak cultivation sects, standing side by side with the Three Gods sect. And this spirit sea and the forest 300 million miles away were designated by the Heavenly Thunder sect as two training grounds for cultivation. It was also because of its special encounter that it became famous throughout the primordial world. These 6 streaks of light were 1 successor disciple and 5 inner disciples of the Heavenly Thunder sect. Senior Brother Lejeune, right now seems to be the time for the Kuei cow to attack. The Kuei cow controls the strongest of the 8 connate lightning beasts, the Purple Night Divine Thunder. If we are not careful, we might die. I will have to trouble Senior Brother to keep an eye on us. As the light descended, a woman said to the dignified and indifferent young man in a purple robe in front of her, "You guys go ahead. I am in charge of this trial and will naturally protect your lives. However, that is only to ensure the safety of your lives. As for breaking your arms and legs or crippling your cultivation, I do not care." Lei Zhenxing did not move. Unlike the other 5, Lei Zhen's body seemed to be surrounded by hazy lightning. It was as if every breath he took resonated with some kind of supreme power in the air, as if he controlled the life and death of an area of 10,000 miles. "Senior Brother, don't worry. Since we dared to participate in this trial, we already know the danger. As long as Senior Brother can help us when we are about to die, it will be enough." Another man hurriedly said. Lejeune was still cold and said, "There is not much time. Don't talk nonsense. You guys go ahead." "Yes." The 5 inner disciples did not dare to delay. They responded and turned into 5 streaks of light, rushing towards the center of the Spirit Sea. After rushing for 30,000 miles, they suddenly split up and rushed into the Spirit Sea below. It is not that easy to become a true disciple. Not only do you have to cultivate the 8 natural thunder beasts, you also have to be able to perfectly use the 8 natural thunder beasts. It took me 572 years to be able to freely enter and exit the Spirit Sea. How long will it take for you guys to pass the trial? Lejeune stood on top of the mountain as his eyes flashed with lightning. There was a faint rumbling sound coming from his body. Suddenly, thousands of lightning bolts flashed in the sky. It was as if the space around him was moving according to his thoughts. There was a trace of the law of his words. Of course, it was only a trace. There was still an unknown number of millions and millions of miles between him and Luo Fan, who could truly follow the law with his words. After this thought flashed through his mind, Lejeune made a grabbing motion with his hand. Boundless lightning in the world responded and gathered towards him. In the blink of an eye, an incomparably majestic throne with lightning dragons coiled around it condensed below him. Sitting on this throne, Lejeune was like the Emperor of Lightning that could suppress the heavens and the earth. This was the vision of someone who had cultivated the Son of Thunder. Chapter 489. Lejeune sat on his throne. His eyes were half closed, and the lightning dragons around him were extremely tame. They slowly swam on the throne, surrounding and protecting Lejeune, causing the oppressive aura of the Emperor of Lightning that Lejeune exuded to become even stronger. Just as Lejeune was paying attention to the situation in the spiritual sea, the 5 inner disciples who were participating in the test had already entered the Kuei Nyo's territory within the spiritual sea. Kuei Nyo, Crouching Infant, Howling Wu, and Xie Huang were 4 of the 8 natural lightning beasts, but they were 4 different types of beasts, after all. As such, it was impossible for them to live in the same spirit sea without any ill feelings between them. Naturally, they had their own territories of influence. This was something that was only natural. If the inner disciples wanted to be promoted to a true disciple, they had to be able to enter and leave the spiritual sea as they pleased. Although the standard was set by Lejeune, they had to at least be able to use the 8 natural lightning beasts to the acme of perfection. Only then would they be able to enter and leave the nests of the 4 natural lightning beasts. As a result, even though the Kuei-Nyo was in heat, and the Kuei-Nyo tribe was at its most irritable, they had no choice but to enter. At the very least, these 5 inner disciples had already cultivated to the crossing disaster stage. Moreover, they had already cultivated the 8 great natural lightning beast bodies. If they did not have these prerequisites, even if they were promoted to a successor disciple, they would not have the qualifications to cultivate the method to form the lightning son of heaven. As soon as the 5 inner disciples entered the Kuei-Nyo's territory, they turned into either Crouching Infant, Barking Wu, or Chui Huang. One of them even turned into a Lotus of Fate. The 8 natural lightning beasts did not belong to each other, nor did they restrain each other. However, they were beasts of the same level after all, and there was not much difference in strength between them. As a result, it was more appropriate to transform into other natural lightning beasts in order to fight the Kuei-Nyo. As for why everyone made different choices, it was because they were more proficient in the natural lightning beasts. These lightning beasts did not live within the Kuei-Nyo's territory. As soon as they entered, they naturally attracted the attention of the countless Kuei-Nyo below. In an instant, the roars of bulls resounded like thunder from the herd of Kuei bulls. The Kuei ox was a strange beast that was shaped like an ox but had only one leg. Its mouth was filled with sharp teeth. This Kuei cow was born with the ability to control the divine thunder of purple heaven. With a shake of its body, an endless net of lightning would surge out from the strange lightning markings engraved on its body, capable of shattering any target. Of course, the size and number of the lightning net would naturally depend on the strength and age of the Kuei cow. Although the number of Kueis that the 5 inner disciples had transformed into numbered in the tens of thousands, they were only 5 innate lightning beasts after all. Hence, after the roar, there were only 108 Kueis that charged towards the 5 inner disciples. Each of the 108 Kuei cows was over 30 meters tall, and when they charged over, they were like 108 small mountains. Their red eyes flashed with an indescribable brutality, as if they wanted to tear apart all living beings in their path. Fu Ying, Wei Wu, Chia Huang, and Fate Lotus were all innate lightning beasts of the same level as the Kuei cows. Naturally, the 5 inner disciples who had transformed into these innate lightning beasts did not panic. Before these Kuei bulls could form into an innate formation and gather their thunder webs together, they each cast out the abilities of their innate thunder beast. In an instant, 5 different sounds rang out, but all of them contained boundless brutality. They stimulated the innate vitality liquid in the surroundings and produced a loud rumbling sound. Along with the rumbling sound, 5 mystic artifacts formed entirely from lightning appeared out of thin air. They unleashed all kinds of attacks that contained boundless power and charged towards the 108 Kuei cows. Gods? Although the Great Tao was about changing one's body that was originally unsuitable for cultivation into that of an innate god? Or perhaps the body of other beasts. However, the Great Tao of cultivation had been perfected by countless intelligent cultivators. Naturally, it was impossible to rely solely on an innate god or a beast's innate ability to fight. Naturally, there would be countless divine abilities and incantations that were based on these innate abilities and special abilities to enrich and strengthen the cultivator's combat strength. These 5 mystic artifacts were formed by the divine lightning wielded by the 4 innate lightning beasts through some mysterious method. They could unleash the power of the divine lightning to its limit, or even surpass that limit. The 108 Kuei cows were now several times stronger than usual under the irritation of the irritation. Facing the attacks from the 5 mystic artifacts, they shook their bodies, and 108 purple heaven thundernets rushed out of their bodies. After they left their bodies, they fused with the other Kuei cows' lightning nets, forming an overwhelming thundercloud that seemed to envelop the entire spiritual sea. With an earth-shattering rumble, it pressed down on the 5 inner disciples. The thundercloud was densely packed with purple heaven thunder nets that had condensed into threads. They were extremely powerful. Just one lightning net was enough to turn a mountain that was tens of thousands of feet tall into powder. Now that they had formed a thundercloud, they complemented and supported each other. The power of the thundercloud was tens of thousands of times stronger than a single lightning net. The spiritual sea seemed to be endless seawater, but in fact, it was formed by the innate vitality that was too dense and condensed. However, it was not ordinary seawater. As soon as it was activated by the thundercloud, an endless amount of liquid was converted into innate vitality and surged into the thundercloud. The thundercloud suddenly condensed and shrank by more than 3 times. However, this shrinkage did not cause the power of the thundercloud to decrease. On the contrary, it was precisely because of its shrinkage that the thundercloud's power skyrocketed by more than 10 times. The thundercloud collided with the numerous attacks from the mystic artifacts formed by the 5 types of divine lightning. It was like Mars colliding with Earth, causing an earth-shattering explosion. The boundless innate vitality liquid turned into boundless innate vitality in the explosion and burst out in all directions. At the same time, it was converted into boundless lightning that quickly spread throughout the spiritual sea. In the end, it disappeared without a trace. Although the thundercloud was condensed from the purple heaven divine lightning unleashed by the 108 Kuei cows, the 5 artifacts were only condensed from the divine lightning unleashed by the 5 inner men disciples. However, in this collision, there was no clear winner. The attacks from the 5 mystic artifacts and the thundercloud actually collapsed at the same time when they collided. In the end, they disappeared without a trace. The profundity of the 5 mystic artifacts could be seen from this. Looks like this Kuei cow isn't that difficult. The power of the 108 Kuei cows combined only has this much power. The inner disciple that had turned into a hidden nascent soul smiled. Don't be too happy. Can't you see that the power of the 108 Kuei cows isn't damaged at all? Furthermore, who knows how many Kuei cows are still eyeing them covetously. If you're too happy now, you'll probably cry later. The inner disciple that had turned into a fate lotus was extremely calm and snorted coldly. Chapter 490. The 108 Kuei cows had all matured. Although they were still incomparable to cultivators who had attained the Tao, the power contained within each Kuei cow was not much different from that of a crossing disaster stage cultivator. In terms of overall strength, there was no suspense at all when so many Kuei cows charged towards the 5 inner disciples. However, the Kuei cows were only a type of connate lightning beast after all. Even if their instinctive abilities were unparalleled, when compared to real cultivators, they naturally lacked a few changes. And it was these few changes that made the difference between heaven and earth. Therefore, although there were 108 Kuei cows in front of them, the 5 inner disciples were not afraid at all. With just a slight thought, the 5 magic tools condensed from various types of divine lightning shook and flashed mysteriously across the sky. In an instant, the 108 Kuei cows were separated and absorbed into the 5 magic tools. There was a mysterious and subtle connection between the 8 great connate lightning beasts. The 5 magic tools were condensed from the divine lightning that the other connate lightning beasts innately controlled. With the help of that mysterious and subtle connection, the 5 magic tools easily refined the Kuei cows into the source of lightning energy, increasing the power of the 5 magic tools. Countless Kuei cows below saw this change, and their violent roars became even more violent. In an instant, 1,296 Kuei cows rushed out from below. The current momentum of these Kuei cows was no longer like the 108 Kuei cows from before. Although they seemed to be rather orderly, they were only arranged into a shape that could unleash the power of the lightning net. The 1,296 Kuei cows were directly arranged into a shape in the spiritual sea. Although it was extremely simple, It could draw the endless liquid Kanate chi in the surroundings and convert it into violet heaven divine lightning, greatly strengthening the Kuei cow's innate abilities. Although these Kuei cows were strange beasts without much intelligence, they were born with extremely powerful instincts. They could naturally put up a formation that could greatly strengthen their instincts. However, even so, the Kanate lightning beasts that the 5 inner disciples had transformed into were not moved at all. The fact that the wise elder was able to create the lightning sun of heaven cultivation method with the help of the 8 innate lightning beasts naturally meant that his understanding of the 8 innate lightning beasts had reached a very deep level. This kind of simple formation was naturally no secret to the heavenly thundermen, but they had thousands of ways to deal with it. The 5 magic tools transformed into 5 different forms in the blink of an eye. As their auras spread, billions of bolts of divine lightning appeared out of thin air, outlining the image of a huge throne in the void. This illusory throne was extremely similar to the one Lei Zhen sat on at the edge of the spiritual sea. However, it was extremely illusory, and there were many holes in the middle. It was the throne of the Son of Heaven that could only be formed by the lightning Son of Heaven. The 5 inner disciples used the 4 innate lightning beasts they cultivated. Although there were 5 inner disciples, 2 of them were the same innate lightning beasts, to form the innate lightning beast throne. The reason why there were so many gaps was naturally because the complete Emperor's throne required all 8 types of natural lightning beasts to be condensed. However, there were only 4 types of natural lightning beasts in this place, which only took up half of the necessary amount. To be able to condense the Emperor's throne with so many gaps meant that the 5 inner disciples already had an extremely deep understanding of the Emperor of Lightning's cultivation method. How could they hope for a complete Emperor's throne? Although it was only the Emperor's throne that was full of holes, when the illusory throne appeared, there was still an indescribable pressure coming from it. All the lightning and energy within 1,000 miles seemed to be firmly suppressed by the Emperor's throne and completely controlled. In an instant, the bodies of the 1,296 Kuei ox shuddered. Even the 1,296 lightning webs that had been brewing on the bodies of the lightning beasts to their limits and were about to leave their bodies shuddered violently. Then, all the lightning webs suddenly collapsed. There were even strands of lightning that left the bodies of each Kuei ox and rushed towards the shadow of the throne of the Son of Heaven, condensing. Moo! A furious bull's roar suddenly rang out from somewhere below. Then, a bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt that could destroy a small world suddenly appeared out of thin air and directly pounced towards the illusory throne of the Emperor. In the blink of an eye, it arrived on the illusory throne of the Emperor's throne and collided with it. It's the Kuei Cow King. An inner disciple that had transformed into a hidden nascent soul said with excitement and fear. The bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt was extremely condensed and extremely smooth. It had even formed countless complete cycles within it. It had already reached a state where it could not be broken by external object. Although this bolt of violet firmament divine lightning was extremely small and weak compared to the lightning net that the Kuei ox had unleashed and the lightning cloud that had condensed into a huge lump, its might was over 10,000 times stronger than the lightning net and the lightning cloud. After all, the Emperor's throne was only an incomplete, illusory image. Although it could suppress the 1,296 Kuei cows, it was still too weak for this bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt. Under the purple heaven thunderbolt, the illusory image of the Emperor's throne of the Emperor suddenly collapsed. In an instant, it shattered into countless types of divine lightning and was directly annihilated by the bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt. In the end, it was devoured by the surrounding spiritual sea without a trace. After the bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt destroyed the illusory image of the Emperor's throne of the Emperor, it was not damaged at all. Without any hesitation, it pounced towards the 5 inner disciples that had condensed the divine lightning. Although it was only a bolt of divine lightning, it was only the size of an ordinary person's arm. Compared to the innate lightning beasts that the 5 inner disciples had transformed into, it was incomparably small. However, when the bolt of purple heaven thunderbolt pounced towards them, the 5 inner disciples felt as if their entire bodies were being restrained by an indescribable invisible force. Even thinking about it required all the strength in their bodies. An aura of death emerged from their minds and quickly filled their entire minds. It made them feel as if their deaths were right in front of them. There was only one Kuei cow king among the herd of Kuei cows. It was a powerful existence that could only appear among hundreds of thousands or even millions of Kuei cows in the herd. To be able to become a king, a Kuei cow had to at least have the power to suppress the entire herd of Kuei cows. It also had to have perfect control over its innate abilities. Encountering a king Kuei cow was obviously a little too early for these inner disciples, who had yet to become true disciples. What a great king! I didn't expect it to have hidden itself so deeply. At the edge of the spirit sea, Lei Zhen's eyes shone as he observed the changes occurring in the depths of the spirit sea. This thought flashed across his mind. However, it was obvious that he had no intention of making a move. Chapter 491. At this moment, a faint sound of thunder came from the bodies of the 5 inner disciples. Then, the magic tools formed by the godly thunder trembled violently. There was a surge of infinite potential that rushed out and was transmitted into the bodies of the 5 inner disciples through some mysterious channel. With the transmission of this infinite potential, the minds of the 5 inner disciples became clear. The aura of death disappeared without a trace in an instant. At the same time, the infinite godly thunder that had dispersed from the shadow of the Emperor's throne began to gather towards the 5 inner disciples. With a speed that was 100 times faster than the godly thunder of purple cloud, it pounced on the bodies of the 5 inner disciples and wrapped them up in an instant. After the godly thunder wrapped them up, it suddenly shook and carried the 5 inner disciples into 5 streams of light that shot straight up. The spirit sea that was formed by the endless liquid connate origin chi seemed to be blackened by the 5 streams of light. It formed a tornado that crazily surged into the 5 streams of light. Through some kind of incomparably complicated process, it turned into a driving force that made the 5 streams of light continuously increase in speed. The godly thunder of purple cloud was released by the Kuei Nyo king in anger. It had reached a perfect and flawless state, so it naturally had countless changes. Although the 5 of them turned into streams of light and flew away, it was impossible for them to dodge the godly thunder of purple cloud so easily. The godly thunder of purple cloud easily turned a mysterious arc in the spirit sea, then changed direction and directly pounced towards the 5 streams of light. The godly thunder of purple cloud even shook slightly during the process, as if it had split into 5 and was thrown towards the 5 streams of light. The godly thunder of purple cloud was mysterious to an unimaginable level. Even though the speed of the 5 streams of light seemed to be much faster than the godly thunder of purple cloud, and seemed to be able to easily escape the bombardment of the godly thunder of purple cloud. However, the godly thunder of purple cloud only took a few breaths before it actually caught up to the 5 streams of light and directly bombarded them. The sound was soft, but it was like the sound of something extremely sturdy. It seemed that even the destruction of heaven and earth would not be able to break the sound of something solid shattering instantly came from the 5 streams of light. Then there were 5 soft grunts. Fresh blood suddenly gushed out of the flowing light and disappeared without a trace in the surrounding spirit sea. The 5 streams of light didn't slow down in the slightest because of this change. Instead, they seemed to have suddenly obtained a new source of energy. Their speed increased explosively by several times, and they directly disappeared from the range of the Kuei ox nest. Moo! The angry and unwilling roar of a bull shook the heavens. A king's aura suddenly rose from the herd of Kuei bulls, and it shot into the sky like a pillar that supported the heavens. It even rushed to the top of the spiritual sea. However, this king's aura only appeared for an instant. After a split second, the aura disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Even the roar had completely stopped. The 5 streaks of light shot straight out of the surface of the spirit sea and into the void above. Even though the Kuei Ox King didn't make another move, they didn't show any signs of stopping. From the looks of it, it seemed like he couldn't control himself at all. Within the flowing light, the 5 inner disciples could no longer maintain their natural lightning beast bodies. Their bodies were in a trance, and they formed an extremely strange state. It was as if they were trying their best to maintain their natural lightning beast bodies, but they didn't have enough strength and were about to be beaten back to their original state. Moreover, every one of them had a pained expression on their faces, and the power in their bodies was extremely weak. There was an extremely thin but extremely stubborn, self-sufficient heavenly thunder of purple clouds, which seemed to have a mind of its own, crazily swimming around them, constantly dispersing the power in their bodies, making it impossible for them to gather their own power, making it difficult for them to maintain their innate thunder beast bodies, and making it impossible for them to control their own bodies. They could only follow the power of the escape light and fly upwards, unable to stop. Is this the change that happens when the purple heaven thunderbolt is condensed to the extreme? Compared to the original method, it has a different kind of profoundness. These 5 inner disciples were able to participate in the test to be promoted to a true disciple, so naturally, they had a certain level of cultivation. At this moment, although it seemed extremely dangerous, none of them panicked, and even had such thoughts in their minds. It's just that it's pure. If the original method was cultivated to the peak, its power would be thousands of times stronger than this. Another inner disciple said disdainfully. At this moment, the inner disciple was circulating all the power in his body, and he was gradually controlling the state of his body. Although he still couldn't get rid of the purple heaven thunderbolt, the situation was developing in a good direction. The Kuei Ox King's purple heaven thunderbolt isn't that easy to get rid of. Lei Jun looked over from below, and a playful smile appeared on his face, but he didn't care. In the blink of an eye, the 5 flowing lights had already reached a height of 3,000 miles above the ground. And at this moment, the 5 purple heaven thunderbolts that had entered the bodies of the 5 inner disciples suddenly shook, as if they had broken through some kind of limit. They suddenly shrank inwards, and unexpectedly condensed into 5 Kuei oxen within the bodies of the 5 inner disciples. Every single one of the Kuei was extremely thin and small, but they all gave off an extremely intelligent aura. Their eyes shone with the light of wisdom. They were like real living beings. After these 5 Kuei oxen had formed, an infinite amount of lightning suddenly spread out from their bodies. Like fishing, the lightning wrapped around the power of the 5 inner disciples, and continuously melted them away. Damn it! At this time, the 5 inner disciples finally changed. When these divine thunderbolts are more than 3,000 miles away from the Kuei Ox King, they will actually break free from the Kuei Ox King's control and naturally form their own consciousness. The inner disciple who had already somewhat controlled the situation exclaimed. Following the transformation of the 5 purple heaven thunderbolts, the 5 inner disciples had completely changed. They could no longer maintain any trace of their natural lightning beast bodies, and all of them were beaten back to their original forms, once again revealing their human bodies. At this time, Lei Jun, who was sitting on the emperor's throne, frowned. His eyes flashed with electricity as he looked at the empty space above him. However, he wasn't staring at the 5 inner men disciples. Instead, he was staring at an empty space 50 kilometers above them. Which expert is spying on my men's divine ability? I wonder if you can show yourself? Lei Jun said indifferently. As he did so, the 5 Kuei cows in the bodies of the 5 inner disciples suddenly collapsed, turning into threads of divine lightning that dissipated from the orifices of the 5 inner disciples. They gradually disappeared into the void, as if they had never appeared. I didn't think that in just a few thousand years, such a mysterious technique would appear in the primordial world. A clear male voice rang out from nowhere. Then, a strange light lit up in the empty space that Lei Zhen was staring at. After this light appeared, it quickly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it had grown to a height of 10 meters, forming a simple door. Behind the door was a man who emitted an indescribable aura. It was as if he was heaven and earth, as if he was the universe, as if he was the boundless empty space. "You're actually Lei Jiuxiao?" Seeing this man, Lei Zhen's expression changed for the first time. Chapter 492. The person who appeared in front of Lei Zhen was Luo Fan's sixth disciple, Lei Jiuxiao, who had not appeared for more than 3,000 years. The 5 inner disciples were in deep trouble. Although it was not that they did not have any means to alleviate the situation in their bodies, they had not really thought of it. Suddenly, they heard senior brother Lei Zhen say those words. Then, the Kuei ox formed by the purple heaven divine thunder suddenly disappeared. How could they not understand that it was because of an unexpected situation that senior brother Lei Zhen had solved the problem in their bodies? At that moment, they did not have time to recover from their injuries. Their bodies shook and they rushed down with the stream of light outside their bodies. They quickly left their original positions and floated in the void hundreds of thousands of feet away from where they were. Only then did they have time to see what exactly had happened. At this moment, senior brother Lei Zhen's other words were also transmitted into their ears. Hearing this, the 5 inner disciples' eyes were first shocked, then they exploded with incomparably strong fanaticism. Luo Fan was a supreme god who suppressed the entire untainted world. No matter how high the innate god was in the eyes of ordinary creatures in the untainted world, they all respected Luo Fan. All of them admired Luo Fan very much. Even if they occasionally mentioned him, they would still sigh in admiration. With such a high status, how many disciples Luo Fan had, and what kind of existences they were had long been spread throughout the untainted world. Even creatures who had just gained spiritual consciousness could probably say one or two things. Under such circumstances, how could the inner disciples of the heavenly Thundermen not have heard of the name Lei Jiuxiao? Lei Jiuxiao? The sixth disciple of Tao Master Luo Fan, the person who is said to have the body of Thunder Spirit and seems to have swum in the supreme way of Thunder origin? This thought instantly resurfaced in the minds of the 5 inner disciples. In an instant, they did not even care about their own injuries. They stared fixedly at the figure that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The heavenly Thunder Man is the god of cultivation? The male faction of the great Tao relied on the 8 great primordial lightning beasts, and their ultimate cultivation achievement was the body of the Lightning Emperor. Under such circumstances, the source of lightning in the supreme great Tao was the goal that almost all the male disciples of the heavenly Thunder sect yearned for, regardless of whether they were outer disciples, inner disciples, successor disciples, or even elders and sect masters. At this moment, an existence that had swum through the supreme quintessence of lightning of the Grand Tao was right in front of them, so how could they bear to let him go? Lei Jiuxiao's appearance did not change much compared to 3,000 years ago, but there was an additional mysterious aura around him. In the eyes of the inner disciples of the heavenly Thunder sect, this born Taoism aptitude was simply the most perfect body in the world. Every rise and fall of his skin, every line of his body, and the proportion of his limbs made them feel a sense of perfection. Even the smallest detail was so in line with the way of thunder that they had comprehended. It was as if the source of thunder and lightning was directly revealed in front of them. It was as if the body of the Lightning Emperor that the heavenly Thunder sect eventually cultivated could not compare to this born Taoism aptitude. Looking at Lei Jiuxiao's body, the inner disciples could faintly feel that some mysterious existence was constantly communicating with this person in front of them. This person's breathing seemed so ordinary to ordinary people, but in the eyes of the inner disciples, it was like he was the thunder and lightning that filled the void of the untainted world. It was as if he was the thunder and lightning, and the thunder and lightning were him. This is the aura of the source of lightning. The 5 inner disciples seemed to have comprehended something. They felt as if they had vaguely comprehended some mysterious truth that they had yearned for, that they had diligently sought but could not obtain. As for what exactly this truth was, it was impossible for them to explain it clearly. Even so, they felt that their 8 great primordial lightning beasts had undergone some kind of inexplicable change. They seemed to have become more complete and complete. Lei Zhen of the Heavenly Thunder sect greets Senior Lei Jiuxiao. At this moment, Lei Zhen had already taken a step forward and arrived in the void. He knelt before Lei Jiuxiao. Seeing Lei Zhen's performance, the other inner disciples came to a sudden realization. They hastily withdrew their fanaticism and hurriedly bowed to Lei Jiuxiao. Lei Jiuxiao could not help but be at a loss when he saw their behavior. Why is this happening? Could it be that the untainted world has undergone such a great change in the past 3,000 years? Although these people's cultivation is lacking, their cultivation methods are quite impressive. Why are they bowing to me as soon as they see me? Such a thought flashed through Lei Jiuxiao's mind. However, Lei Jiuxiao had lived in the small kiliacosm for tens of millions of years. His mental cultivation had already reached an incredible level. Although he had such a thought in his mind, he did not slow down at all. He hurriedly helped everyone up and said, "You're too courteous. I'm only an itinerant celestial cultivator. I don't deserve such courtesy." "Senior Jiuxiao, you're wrong. You're the disciple of Tao Master Luo Fan and a fellow disciple of the 3 Gods sect's founder. This courtesy is appropriate," Lei Zhen hurriedly said. "Tao Master? So Master is already called a Tao Master. Then what kind of sect is the 3 Gods sect?" Lei Jiuxiao's mind jolted when he heard this. However, he naturally could not say this out loud. He immediately laughed and helped everyone up. He said, "I've just come out of the Dong Tian. It's been more than 3,000 years since I left the untainted world. I don't know anything about the changes in the untainted world. Since I've met all of you here, it must be fate that brought us together. Why don't all of you follow me into the Thunder Dong Tian? I can also ask all of you about the changes in the untainted world." "As you command, Senior." Lei Zhen bowed. Among the Heavenly Thunder disciples, the 5 inner disciples were already in the crossing calamity realm. They were only one step away from passing the heavenly tribulation and becoming an itinerant celestial. Lei Zhen had already cultivated the lightning sun of heaven. Although it was only the initial stage, he had already reached the itinerant celestial realm. He was not too far away from the peak. However, all of them felt that they were as insignificant as ants in front of Lei Jiuxiao. Even Lei Zhen felt that as long as Lei Jiuxiao willed it, he would only need to crush him with a finger to crush him into dust. That was why they were so obedient to Lei Jiuxiao. As for the fact that Lei Jiuxiao was a disciple of Tao Master Luo Fan and a fellow disciple of the 3 Gods sect's founder, that was secondary. Although Lei Jiuxiao's status was noble, what did it have to do with them? They were the Heavenly Thunder Men, not the disciples of the 3 Gods sect or Tao Master Luo Fan. Lei Jiuxiao was well aware of this, but he did not point it out. After all, he still needed to understand the changes in the untainted world over the past 3,000 years from these people. Chapter 493. Heavenly Abode Appears, Part 2. Lei Jiuxiao chuckled and made a grabbing motion. The door that he had just come out of appeared once again. However, Lei Zhen and the others only felt an incomparably mysterious invisible force suddenly appear out of nowhere and wrap around them. This caused their bodies to float forward uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, they had already followed Lei Jiuxiao into the door. After everyone entered, the door shook slightly and slowly disappeared without a trace like an illusion. When Lei Zhen and the others returned to their senses, they found that their surroundings had already changed. "This is the lightning heavenly abode?" Lei Zhen looked at the surroundings that were similar to the untainted world. Only the faint sound of thunder could be heard from above. His mind was filled with doubt and shock. This was not the untainted world. Lei Zhen sensed something the moment he set foot in this world. The surroundings seemed to be the same as the untainted world, but it lacked a boundless and boundless aura. The structure of the boundless qi that filled the void was also extremely different from the boundless qi in the untainted world. Any living being with slightly acute senses would be able to easily master this technique in 100 years. Furthermore, Lei Zhen had already cultivated the Lightning Emperor's body. At this moment, Lei Jiuxiao chuckled and said, "The Lightning Heavenly Abode is only the name I have for this place. As for what it should be called, I have not decided yet." As he spoke, there was a loud crack that shook the entire heavenly abode. Almost at the exact same moment, a gargantuan lightning dragon that was tens of millions of feet in length came crashing down from the sky above, where the faint sound of thunder could be heard. This lightning dragon contained boundless vitality and was extremely fast. In an instant, it rushed into the ground of the heavenly abode. Endless violent sounds rang out from underground, and the entire ground began to shake violently. Finally, after a long while, the ground slowly disappeared and the ground regained its calm. However, with his sharp senses, Lei Zhen discovered that after the lightning dragon rushed into the ground, the vitality of the entire land seemed to have increased significantly. He even saw spots of green suddenly appear where the lightning dragon had rushed in. The wood elemental spiritual energy gradually spread out, adding a lot of vitality to this part of the world. This is the creation heavenly thunder. I didn't expect such heavenly thunder to exist in nature. The Lightning Emperor's body had an unimaginable sense of all lightning in the world. As soon as Lei Zhen sensed this lightning dragon, he knew what kind of lightning it was condensed from. The creation heavenly thunder was not one of the 8 great divine thunders controlled by the 8 great divine thunders. However, it was a type of heavenly thunder that was derived from the divine thunders. Its power was only at the 1296 types of heavenly thunder that were derived from the 8 great divine thunders. This was the reason that the lightning dragon rushed into the ground 1 1 1 1 1 1 and 1 2. 1 1 1 1 1 1 and 1 1 1 1 1 2 1 1 and 1 1. Above them, there was a seemingly simple immortal cave abode. The cave abode was at the peak of the mountain. It looked like a 3 feet tall, 1-acre stone house. There were no decorations on the inside or outside of the stone house. It looked extremely simple and unadorned. However, it emitted an indescribable majesty. The countless lightning dragons around the mountain were scattered in the void, but they could not get close to the stone house. They only gathered around it, as if they were guarding it. When they stepped onto the edge of the cave abode, Lei Zhen and the others were shocked. The essence qi around the cave abode seemed to have undergone some mysterious changes. It turned into a mysterious essence qi that was between chaotic essence qi and connate essence qi. This mysterious essence qi was filled with the essence of lightning that was as gentle as water. The benefits of breathing in the cave abode were even more than cultivating in the outside world for a month. Lei Jiuxiao naturally did not mind. He led them into the cave abode. After sitting down, he casually explained the origin of the name Thunder Cave Abode and told them about the changes in the untainted land over the past 3,000 years. When Lei Zhen and the others saw such a cave abode, they were even more impressed by Lei Jiuxiao. They immediately told Lei Jiuxiao everything they knew and explained the changes in the untainted land over the past 3,000 years. As Lei Jiuxiao listened to these changes, he was inexplicably amazed. If he entered the virtual world, he could easily find out about these things. However, it was troublesome after all. Now that someone was explaining, it was even easier. Lei Jiuxiao sighed. It's only been 3,000 years, yet the primordial world has changed so much. It's nothing more than the vicissitudes. Back then, after being summoned by Luo Fan into the Void Wuji Palace that had already merged with the untainted land, Lei Jiuxiao's aptitude was comparable to other connate gods' senior brothers and sisters. However, because his mind surpassed almost all connate gods, his comprehension was only slightly worse than Hongjuan's. He was even several times better than Luo Fu and the others. Although the 296 billion square meters of small worlds that appeared in the untainted land after the Great Tribulation of heaven and earth were different from the untainted land, they were still worlds after all. The evolution process naturally could not be calculated according to the number of days. If one wanted to roughly see something clearly, it would take at least tens of thousands of years. Therefore, the few of them and Luo Fan stayed in the strange palace for more than 2,000 years. During those 2,000 years, the few of them made great progress. Needless to say, Hongjun did not reach the peak of the golden immortal realm, but he completed the progress that would have taken tens of thousands of years of hard cultivation. Luo Fu and Guang Pu directly raised their cultivation realms to the peak of the perfected immortal realm. They were only one step away from the golden immortal realm. In addition to the two of them, Luo Chunyang directly raised his cultivation realm to the peak of the individual immortal realm. He was also one step away from the perfected immortal realm. Gu Ling was slightly worse than the others. He just barely stepped into the peak of the individual immortal realm. He was much further away from the perfected immortal realm than Luo Chunyang. After all, he was originally only in the crossing disaster realm. It was already difficult for him to make such a huge leap. Lei Jiuxiao originally just stepped into the individual immortal realm. However, after 2,000 years of comprehension, he fought to a very strange realm. He had already surpassed the individual immortal realm, but still lacked a little opportunity to reach the perfected immortal realm. It could be said that he was half a step away from the perfected immortal realm. The harvest of those 2,000 years was simply unimaginable. It made them wish that they could never leave. They wanted to stay in the strange palace forever to comprehend the mysterious aura emitted by the 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, 2,000 years was the limit that the few of them could endure. Even Hongjun, who had the highest cultivation realm, felt dizzy after comprehending the aura for 2,000 years. He felt that his whole mind, his whole divine soul, and his whole sea of consciousness were filled with some kind of strange information. He felt that it was extremely difficult to operate it. How could he continue to comprehend the extremely mysterious aura? At that time, Luo Fan said to them, "Your opportunity has come to an end. Each of you can choose a cave to cultivate in." As he spoke, he sent them out of the strange palace. Meanwhile, he continued to comprehend the indestructible aura that was emitted by the 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. He wanted to comprehend all kinds of mysterious secrets from it to improve his cultivation realm. However, he did not care about Hongjun and the others anymore. Although Hongjun and the others were very unwilling, they knew that what Luo Fan said was the truth. Even if they stayed in the palace, they would only be wasting time. Therefore, after a discussion, they could only reluctantly choose one of the 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. They turned around and entered the place that was most suitable for them to cultivate. The 2,000 years of comprehension allowed them to obtain all kinds of understanding and improve their cultivation realm. At the same time, it also allowed them to have a deep understanding of the nature of the 296 billion square meters of heaven and earth. Although the shocking number of heaven and earth were complete heaven and earth, they were attached to the primordial world and were rooted in the void of the primordial world. They were a great supplement to the primordial world. They breathed in all kinds of vitality and a mysterious and indescribable aura. However, they could not form independently. Seriously speaking, they were similar to the minor kiliacosm and medium kiliacosm in the Void Wuji Palace that Luo Fan had opened up. Therefore, they could be called grotto heavens. In addition, when Luo Fan asked them to leave, he called these heaven and earth grotto heavens, so they were naturally grotto heavens. The place that Lei Jiuxiao chose was the small heaven and earth that he, Lei Zhen, and the others were currently in. This small world was generally similar to the primordial world. At that time, the primordial qi that filled the void carried the aura of the source of lightning that only existed in the supreme great Tao. This aura was extremely beneficial to Lei Jiuxiao, who had a lightning spirit body. The half-step perfected immortal realm was a rather awkward realm. Lei Jiuxiao had cultivated in this grotto heaven for 1,000 years. Naturally, he wanted to take the remaining half-step and truly reach the perfected immortal realm. However, although he was only half a step away, it was not something that could be crossed in the short 1,000 years. Over the 1,000 years, apart from improving his various techniques to the extent that they were compatible with his cultivation realm, Lei Jiuxiao's improvement was rather limited. Chapter 494. After the Great Tribulation of Heaven and Earth, the number of worlds formed in the untainted land reached 296 billion. However, although there were many of them, they were extremely rare when they were scattered across the entire untainted land. Moreover, because these worlds were originally a complete part of the untainted land, they existed perfectly in the untainted land. Unless one had an extremely deep understanding of the untainted land, it would be extremely difficult to find them. Because of this, Lei Jiuxiao's Thunderbolt Cave was hidden more than 3,000 li above the Spirit Sea. However, even the Heavenly Thunder Men, Elder, who was able to create the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven's cultivation method, did not notice its existence. This allowed Lei Jiuxiao to have more than 1,000 years of peace and quiet. After painstakingly cultivating for more than 1,000 years without any progress, Lei Jiuxiao could not help but want to travel. He immediately said to Lei Zhen, "I heard that you Heavenly Thunder Men created the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven's cultivation method. I wonder what price I have to pay to learn it?" When Lei Zhen and the others heard this, they could not help but be pleasantly surprised. Although Lei Jiuxiao had not done anything spectacular in the untainted land, he had a master who was revered as a Tao master by the entire untainted land. This gave him an extremely transcendent status. Lei Jiuxiao, who had such a high status and the inheritance of a Tao master, was actually interested in their cultivation method. This was extremely great encouragement to them. This proved that the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven's cultivation method, in Lei Jiuxiao's opinion, should at least be considered exquisite. How could they not be pleasantly surprised and excited? After the pleasant surprise and excitement, Lei Zhen scratched his head. After thinking for a while, Lei Zhen said, "Senior, you have seen the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven's cultivation method, so I should offer it to you with both hands. However, although I am a true disciple of the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven, I have no right to give the supreme cultivation method of the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven to outsiders. If you really want this cultivation method, you have to discuss it with the sect master." "I see. Then why don't you send someone to take me to your sect master?" Lei Jiuxiao had already expected Lei Zhen's answer. He smiled and said. Hearing Lei Jiuxiao's words, Lei Zhen hurriedly said, "There is no need for that. We also have a dojo in the virtual world. If Senior is interested, you can directly enter the virtual world and contact our sect master. There is no need for you to personally go to our mountain." "That's not appropriate at all. How can I not go there personally to ask for cultivation methods from the higher-ups?" Lei Jiuxiao chuckled. Hearing this, Lei Zhen frowned slightly. However, he had already cultivated the body of the Lightning Son of Heaven after all, and was equivalent to a rogue immortal realm cultivator, so he naturally had his own decision. Thus, he immediately said, "Since Senior has such a wish, I will naturally comply." Lei Zhen was a true disciple and his status was far higher than the other inner disciples. It could even be said that he controlled the life and death of these inner disciples. Under such circumstances, Lei Zhen naturally did not need to consider the opinions of the other inner men disciples when he made his decision. Fortunately, these inner disciples were in complete agreement with Lei Zhen's decision. Thus, there was no disagreement. Lei Jiuxiao could tell from their expressions that they didn't know what was going on. Thus, he didn't ask any more questions. He merely chuckled and waved his hand. The void distorted and brought Lei Zhen and the others out of the lightning cave. They once again appeared in the sky 3,000 miles above the spiritual sea. Although Lei Zhen and the others were extremely interested in the lightning cave and wanted to stay in it for a while longer, it was still Lei Jiuxiao's residence. How long they could stay would naturally depend on Lei Jiuxiao's wishes. Hence, it was not appropriate for them to say anything. At this moment, a large flock of strange birds with heads like infants, 6 wings, and 9 tails appeared nearby. It was obvious that they were migrating. The moment Lei Jiuxiao and the others appeared, these strange birds were attracted by their aura and instantly discovered them. Their cries, which sounded like the cries of infants, surged towards them. "These are hidden infants!" The 5 inner disciples couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this flock of strange birds. These strange birds were one of the 8 great connate lightning beasts, the hidden infants. If it was only a hidden nascent soul, these inner disciples naturally wouldn't pay any attention to it. Even the weakest inner disciple here could easily kill it. But at this moment, there were more than 100,000 hidden nascent soul cultivators. When such a large flock flew over, it was like a cloud that blotted out the sky. The shock was unimaginable. Lei Zhen frowned when he heard their exclamations and said, "It's just a flock of connate lightning beasts. Why are you making such a fuss? You are still far from being promoted to a true disciple." Even Lei Zhen wasn't moved by this, let alone Lei Jiuxiao. Although there were 100,000 hidden infants, Lei Jiuxiao's expression didn't change at all. He merely watched with a smile and had no intention of making a move. Lei Jiuxiao did not move. Knowing that Lei Jiuxiao wanted to see what he was capable of, Xiao Chen did not hesitate. Boundless lightning appeared out of thin air, instantly forming a seal the size of a fist. The seal looked very simple and unadorned, as if it had been born along with the heavens and earth. It was a mysterious existence that had been carved over a long period of time. After the seal was formed, it exuded an indescribable aura. The space that this aura passed through seemed to be controlled by an indescribable will. It was as if it had been completely separated from the untainted world and formed a world that was controlled by the seal. This seal was a kind of magical power that came with the body of the Lightning Emperor, the Heaven's Seal. It was the same quality as the Emperor's throne that Lei Zhen had. After the Heaven's Seal appeared, the large flock of hidden infants froze for a moment. It was as if they had suddenly seen a supreme existence that had a natural suppressive force on them. They were instantly stunned. Lei Zhen waved his hand and the Heaven's Seal flew forward. It expanded in the wind and turned into a huge seal with a circumference of 100,000 zhang and the size of a mountain in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the engravings at the bottom of the seal became extremely conspicuous because of its enlargement. It also emitted boundless lightning, as if it was going to destroy the void at the same time. The engravings at the bottom of the seal also became extremely conspicuous because of its enlargement. It also emitted boundless lightning, as if it was going to destroy the void at the same time. The cries of the crouching infants became extremely frightened and mournful. Endless lightning suddenly shot out from the 9 tails of these strange birds and condensed into a huge baby head. With a ferocious expression, it slammed into the seal. Fu Ying was one of the 8 primordial thunder beasts. Similar to the Kuei-Nyo, Fu Ying was born to control the Azure Heaven Thunder. Its power was slightly weaker than the Purple Heaven Thunder, but it had the power that the Purple Heaven Thunder didn't have, turning illusions into reality. Chapter 495. The giant baby head was the head of the hidden infant, and it was the form that could unleash the power of the Jade Sky Divine Lightning. The head suddenly collided with the Heaven's Child's seal. In an instant, an earth-shattering sound erupted from the point of collision. Boundless lightning covered the sky and the earth. enveloping the space within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. It was as if the end of the world had occurred before everyone's eyes. Lejeune said indifferently, "It's just an instinctive ability. How can it compare to the physical strength of the heavenly lightning men?" He raised his right hand and pressed it down. Although it wasn't very fast, it was as if it held the power of heaven and earth. As it pressed down, it was as if the entire world was being pulled along with it, producing an unbelievable power. As he did so, the huge baby head formed by the azure heaven's divine lightning collapsed with a loud bang. The 100,000 hidden infant also collapsed in an instant. They let out miserable cries, and were no longer able to form a complete group. They fell from the sky like rain. In the end, apart from a few of the stronger and more mature hidden infant, almost all the innate lightning beasts fell into the spiritual sea below. Moo, as the hidden infant fell, as the spiritual sea churned, a majestic bull's roar came from below. It shook the water of the spiritual sea, causing it to churn endlessly. Boundless lightning burst out and spread out, turning the spiritual sea within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers into a sea of lightning. It was the hidden infant that had fallen and invaded the Kuei Ox's territory, resulting in an intense battle. The number of hidden infant was originally smaller than the Kuei Ox's tribe. After all, this was the Kuei Ox's lair, not the hidden infant's lair. On top of that, the hidden Ing had suffered a great loss in the battle against Lejeune. Although not many hidden Ing had died, their strength had been greatly shaken and their bodies had suffered many injuries. Due to these two reasons, the outcome of the battle had been decided as soon as it broke out. However, this naturally didn't matter to Lei Jiuxiao and the others. They couldn't pay too much attention to it. Lei Jiuxiao smiled and said, "The heavenly lightning men is indeed profound." Lejeune hurriedly said modestly, "Apologies for my incompetence." As he spoke, he'd already recalled the Heaven's Child's seal, and with a casual grab, it transformed back into strands of lightning that gradually vanished into space. The Heaven's Child's seal was just a divine ability, it wasn't real. Just now, when the Emperor's seal collided with the baby's head, it looked like the Emperor's seal had used absolute power to crush the baby's head. It looked like there was only a huge disparity in strength. However, that was not the case. After all, this Heaven's Child seal had only been casually formed by Lejeune. Although its structure was in accordance with some mysterious truth of lightning, it was unimaginably sturdy. However, it was only a small amount of lightning. In terms of power and brute force, it could not compare to the azure heaven divine lightning that was formed by 100,000 hidden nascent souls. The reason there was such a great disparity was because the Emperor's seal innately suppressed all the lightning in the primordial world, especially the 8 types of divine lightning condensed by the 8 natural lightning beasts. In the instant that the seal came into contact with the baby's head, it seemed like it was just a simple action, but in reality, there were billions of changes that had occurred. During the process of the changes, the azure heaven divine lightning on the baby's head was continuously taken by the Emperor's seal. It kept changing, and in the end, it turned around and struck the baby's head again. In addition to the power of the Emperor's seal itself, all of these factors superimposed on each other, resulting in the huge disparity. Lei Jiuxiao naturally saw all of the changes. That was why he was so impressed. As he spoke, the few of them set off again and headed towards the mountain of the heavenly thundermen. There were 8 natural lightning beasts in the Linghai prefecture, and the body of the son of lightning of the heavenly thundermen was created based on the 8 natural lightning beasts. The mountain of the heavenly thundermen was naturally in the Linghai prefecture. However, it was not too far away from the Spirit Sea. It was only about 2 billion kilometers away. Those who cultivated the Thunder Dharma were naturally faster than ordinary cultivators. Thus, even for these inner disciples, it would only take a few years to cross this distance of 2 billion kilometers, let alone Lejeune and Lei Jiuxiao, who had already attained the Tao. The few of them turned into streaks of light and headed towards the heavenly thundermen. Among them, Lei Jiuxiao followed Lei Zhen unhurriedly. Lei Zhen naturally could not ignore the inner disciples, so the streaks of light he transformed into spread out and wrapped around the 5 inner disciples' streaks of light. With the help of some mysterious technique of the heavenly thunder men, the speed of the 5 inner disciples skyrocketed. Thus, they did not fall behind. Although they transformed into streaks of light, to Lei Zhen and Lei Jiuxiao, this was no different from a normal journey. Naturally, it was not impossible. Along the way, Lei Zhen did not miss any opportunity to talk to Lei Jiuxiao about his understanding of the untainted land. In the process, he mixed in some of the problems he had encountered in his cultivation, hoping to obtain Lei Jiuxiao's answers. Lei Jiuxiao knew Lei Zhen's thoughts like the back of his hand, but he did not dislike it. Although he did not completely answer all of Lei Jiuxiao's questions, he did not deliberately hide anything. Occasionally, he would reveal a few words. To Lei Zhen, these few words were already an unimaginably huge gain. It made Lei Zhen's Tao heart, which had never been moved, tremble inexplicably. He could almost feel his cultivation realm growing at a perceptible speed. Lei Jiuxiao was currently a half-step true immortal, while Lei Zhen was currently an itinerant immortal. The difference in their cultivation realms was only 1 step. If it were any other cultivator, even if it were a Khanate god, it was impossible for Lei Zhen to reap such a huge harvest with just a few words. The reason why Lei Jiuxiao could achieve this was because he cultivated the Tao fruit Great Tao that Luo Fan had created. Its degree of subtlety was far greater than the Sun of Lightning that Lei Zhen cultivated. In addition, he was constantly under the influence of Luo Fan. Occasionally, his words would reveal a few words that Luo Fan had said before, which were supreme techniques that directly pointed to the profound mysteries of the Great Tao. Naturally, it could cause an indescribable shock in Lei Zhen's mind. In this faint flow of energy, Lei Jiuxiao and Lei Zhen walked and stopped. After 3 years, they finally arrived in front of a huge mountain range with a circumference of 300,000 miles. There were 1,296 mountains in this mountain range. Among them, the tallest mountain was 100 million feet tall, while the shortest mountain was 100,000 feet tall. "This is the mountain of my heavenly thunder." Lei Zhen stopped and smiled at Lei Jiuxiao. "It is indeed majestic." Lei Jiuxiao looked at the huge mountain range and could not help but exclaim. Chapter 496. All the mountains in this mountain range stood according to some extremely complicated and abstruse positions, forming an extremely exquisite formation, forming an extremely mysterious domain in the entire mountain range. The mountain range was filled with ancient trees, exotic flowers, and rare beasts. The density of the innate vitality here was over 10,000 times greater than the outside world. There were also several Hun chaotic vitality sources hidden in the formation core of the mountain range. Streaks of light rose and fell in the mountain range, and auras that were both strong and weak filled the mountain range. It looked like an indescribable immortal cave or a home of cultivators. If this scene were to happen to other cultivators, or even other powerful innate gods, their eyes would naturally be filled with indescribable shock. His eyes were naturally filled with indescribable shock. He was shocked by the strength of this heavenly thunder men. But for Lei Jiuxiao, who had seen many things and had even seen small, medium-sized, and thunderstorms, the mountain range before him could only be described as majestic. Lei Zhen didn't know that Lei Jiuxiao looked down on this mountain range. When he heard Lei Jiuxiao's words, he only thought that Lei Jiuxiao was praising the mountain range's power, so he couldn't help but feel proud. However, his cultivation of the Tao heart had already attained an extremely high level after all, so he merely smiled lightly. With a thought, rays of lightning gathered in front of him, instantly condensing into a profound and complicated talisman. After the talisman was formed, it suddenly blasted forward. It was as if a huge door had been opened on an invisible barrier, and a huge hole that seemed to be made of gold appeared in the void. It was 30 meters tall and over 150 kilometers long. At the same time, there seemed to be countless talismans and runes flashing outside the door. They drew a huge arc in the void, heading into the distance. In the end, they outlined the outline of a huge hemispherical defensive barrier that could envelop the entire mountain range. The outline disappeared as the runes flickered, and the surroundings returned to normal. There seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary, and it was completely no different from the surrounding void. Only the long passage made of gold appeared in front of everyone. Lei Jiuxiao looked at this scene, but his expression and mind didn't change at all. He had seen through the function of this formation with a single glance, and he had even analyzed its performance. At this moment, the appearance of such a defensive barrier formed by the grand formation before him was within his expectations, so there was naturally no need for him to be surprised. "Senior, please." After Lei Zhen opened the door, he made an inviting gesture towards Lei Jiuxiao. Lei Jiuxiao smiled and nodded. Without saying anything, he took a step forward and stepped into the golden passageway ahead. Lei Zhen and a few other inner disciples followed behind Lei Jiuxiao, blindly walking forward. After all, they were not ordinary people. Even if they were walking slowly, their speed was still quite impressive. In just a few breaths of time, they had already crossed 100 years. When they passed through the golden passageway, the innate yuan qi in front of them, which was tens of thousands of times denser than the outside world, blew against their faces. Taking a deep breath, they felt as if they had been completely cleansed from the inside out. Even Lei Zhen couldn't help but feel relieved. Lei Jiuxiao breathed in the dense innate yuan qi, but there wasn't the slightest hint of comfort or discomfort on his face. He was only inexplicably calm. After all, after attaining the earthly immortal's Tao fruit, he had been refining his magic power and confirming that the most effective earthly immortal's Tao fruit was still the Hun chaotic innate yuan qi. To him, innate yuan qi was already too low a level. If he were to absorb innate yuan qi to cultivate, his cultivation speed would be at least tens of thousands of times slower. Under such circumstances, even if the innate yuan qi was so dense that it was solid, it still wouldn't catch his eye. "Welcome to my heavenly thunder men, fellow Taoist Lei." At this moment, an indifferent and clear voice sounded in Lei Jiuxiao's ears. Then, lightning condensed, and 16 figures formed from lightning appeared in front of Lei Jiuxiao. These human figures had identical faces, and apart from the fact that they were condensed from lightning, which was a little unusual, they looked like real bodies of blood and flesh. The person who spoke was the middle-aged man at the very front. "I am the Lord of the Heavenly Thunder Men. These are the 15 elders of the men. Because we are currently refining a lightning magic treasure, we can't personally welcome you. Please forgive us, fellow Taoists." The middle-aged man smiled. When Lei Zhen and the others saw the figures in front of them, they hurriedly bowed and stood to the side. The moment Lei Jiuxiao saw the figures formed from lightning, he knew that it was some kind of avatar technique. Although this technique was mysterious, it wasn't rare. At the very least, his master had taught him no less than 30 such avatar techniques. In comparison, the techniques used by the Heavenly Thunder Men were only ordinary. Lei Jiuxiao had come for the Heavenly Thunder Men's cultivation method of the Son of Lightning, so he naturally couldn't be arrogant. Thus he smiled and said, "There's no need to be so polite, fellow Taoist. I didn't know you were refining a magic treasure, so I should be the one apologizing." "Haha. Fellow Taoist Lei, you're too kind. It's our honor to visit the Heavenly Thunder Men. This way, please." The Lord of the Heavenly Thunder Men laughed. Lei Jiuxiao smiled and nodded, then followed the Lord of the Heavenly Thunder Men and landed on a mountain in the center of the mountain range. This mountain was 1,000,000 meters tall. It wasn't the tallest in the entire mountain range, but it was the place with the densest vitality. The peak of the mountain was hundreds of thousands of meters wide, and it was extremely flat like a mirror. Clearly, someone had flattened it with great force. On top of this extremely flat mountain peak, there was a majestic palace that exuded the aura of a ruler. The supreme cultivation method of the heavenly thundermen was the cultivation method of the Son of Lightning. Since it was called the Son of Lightning, it naturally needed the aura of a ruler that could control everything. Although these palaces didn't take up too much space, they all corresponded with some indescribable mystery, bringing out the aura of a ruler to the fullest. All living beings that lived in them would be subtly modified, gradually tainting them with the aura of a ruler. In the end, it would be easier for them to cultivate the mysterious cultivation method of the Son of Lightning. The Lord of the Heavenly Thundermen landed in front of one of the palaces with Lei Jiuxiao and the others. As soon as they entered, Lei Jiuxiao felt strands of chaotic vitality seeping out from below. Through some kind of complicated and abnormal transformation, it was converted into innate vitality that contained the aura of lightning. It filled the interior of the palace, forming a domain that was extremely beneficial for cultivating lightning arts. Although the Lord of the Heavenly Thundermen and the others were only avatars, they received Lei Jiuxiao with the same etiquette. It was grand and simple, making Lei Jiuxiao feel respected but not complicated. It was rather comfortable, so he wasn't in a hurry to reveal his purpose for coming. As for Lei Zhen and the others, there was nothing for them to do after the Lord of the Heavenly Thundermen appeared. The Lord of the Heavenly Thundermen said a few words and gave Lei Zhen and the others some contribution points before letting them leave. After both sides sat down, the Lord of the Heavenly Thundermen smiled and said, "I've already learned of your purpose for coming from Lei Zhen. I wonder what you're willing to pay in exchange for our sex cultivation method?" The Lord of the Heavenly Thundermen was also an innate god? Strictly speaking, his seniority wasn't any lower than Luo Fan's. It was just that Luo Fan's cultivation level was too high, so he didn't dare to compare himself to him. Now that he was facing Luo Fan's disciple, Lei Jiuxiao, although he was extremely courteous, he actually didn't have much of a mental disadvantage. Now that they were talking about the cultivation method of the Heavenly Thundermen, he naturally wouldn't be polite at all. Chapter 497. Lei Jiuxiao's mental cultivation had reached an unimaginable level. He had already expected the man's reaction, so he wasn't moved at all. He smiled and said, "Since you know why I'm here and are willing to talk with me, you must have a plan in mind. Why don't you tell me?" "Sure enough, I can't hide anything from you." The man smiled. While the Heavenly Thunder Lord and Lei Jiuxiao were talking, the other elders were like clay sculptures, just sitting at the side. It was obvious that the Heavenly Thundermen Lord had absolute authority in this Heavenly Thundermen. Lei Jiuxiao nodded but didn't say anything. In reality, he wasn't determined to obtain the cultivation method for the Lightning Emperor's body. The reason why he wanted to obtain this cultivation method was because he felt that the cultivation method for the Lightning Emperor's body was similar to his lightning spirit body. He just wanted to see if there was anything he could learn from this cultivation method. The reason why he directly went to the man's mountain was to find an excuse to travel the primordial world. It was because of this mentality that he didn't care about any of the man's conditions. At most, he didn't want the cultivation method. The Heavenly Thunder Lord naturally didn't wait for Lei Jiuxiao's reply. After smiling, he said, "Lei Zhen said that fellow Taoist knows of a lightning tunnel above the Spirit Sea. If fellow Taoist is willing to tell me the method to enter and exit the lightning tunnel, I can give you the cultivation method of the Heavenly Son of Lightning. What do you think?" After saying that, the man looked at Lei Jiuxiao with a smile, waiting for him to make a decision. He was the leader of a sect as well. His cultivation in the Tao Heart had already attained the true immortal realm, and his cultivation in the Tao Heart had even attained the 4th level of the Tao Heart. He'd long since possessed the might to remain unmoved by external forces. Thus, at this moment, even though he was discussing the Heavenly Lightning Sect's ultimate cultivation technique with someone else, his mind and consciousness were extremely calm, and there wasn't the slightest trace of unusual fluctuations. He seemed to be the same as Lei Jiuxiao. It didn't matter if he succeeded or not. Lei Jiuxiao looked at the Heavenly Thunder Lord with a deep gaze that seemed to contain boundless wisdom. He was able to see through the intentions of the Heavenly Thunder Lord. In reality, entering and exiting the Heavenly Lightning Cavern wasn't too troublesome. There weren't any complicated and abstruse techniques that could be used as the key. As long as they knew the location of the Lightning Heaven, any cultivator whose cultivation base had reached the bodiless immortal realm would be able to find a way to enter and exit the Lightning Heaven after spending some time studying it. Although this period of time could be thousands, tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years. Therefore, if it was purely based on entering and exiting the Heavenly Thunder Art, the Heavenly Thunder Art didn't need to pay any price to exchange with him. The reason why the Heavenly Thunder Lord had proposed such a trade wasn't because of the method to enter the Heavenly Thunder Cavern, but rather the entire Heavenly Thunder Cavern. Sure. Lei Jiuxiao smiled and nodded. Although he had been cultivating in the Thunderbolt Sky for such a long time, it did not mean that he valued the Thunderbolt Sky very much. For him, the Thunder Sky piercing thunder was only a place that had some benefits for his Thunder Spirit body. It could slightly increase the speed of his cultivation. There were currently 1.296 billion Heavenly Thunder Caverns in the Untainted Land, and many of them were similar to the Thunderbolt Sky piercing thunder cavern. If he wanted to, he could easily find another one at any time. Therefore, the Thunderbolt Sky piercing thunder cavern, which the Heavenly Thunder Master thought was extremely precious and was even willing to exchange their sect-guarding cultivation methods for, was something that he could do without. Moreover, the Heavenly Thunder Master had spoken with propriety. He didn't directly ask for the Thunderbolt Sky piercing thunder cavern, but only the method to enter and exit it. This meant that he didn't want to monopolize the Thunderbolt Sky piercing thunder cavern, but only wanted to share it with Lei Jiuxiao. To Lei Jiuxiao there was almost no real loss. Under these circumstances, what reason did Lei Jiuxiao have to refuse? Being stared at by Lei Jiuxiao like this, the Heavenly Thunder Sect Master instantly understood that Lei Jiuxiao had already understood the hidden meaning in his words. He wasn't embarrassed and faintly smiled. Since that's the case, please look. With that, he pointed. Boundless lightning appeared out of thin air 3 feet in front of him and quickly condensed. In an instant, a thick book that was 3 feet wide and looked like 2 bricks stacked on top of each other was condensed into a huge book that looked like a man's board. Lei Jiuxiao couldn't help but nod inwardly at the Heavenly Thunder Master's actions. The Heavenly Thunder Master's method was to use his own will to naturally produce pure and mysterious divine lightning in the void. It was thousands of times more profound than the method Lei Zhen and the others had used to condense magic tools. From this, it could be seen how powerful the Heavenly Thunder Master was. Lei Jiuxiao raised his hand and beckoned. The book condensed from lightning floated toward him and landed in his hand. As soon as he touched the book, Lei Jiuxiao's eyes lit up. A pulsation of life was emanating from the book, as if it was a living thing, a mysterious creature that was growing in the primal chaos. It has actually condensed the embryonic form of a origin spirit. It is indeed profound. It seems that exchanging a thunder cavern for this cultivation method is worth it. Lei Jiuxiao smiled. This was a pulse of life coming from the book, and it was emitted by the origin spirit that was brewing inside the book. This kind of origin spirit was similar in nature to the treasure spirit of a magic treasure. As long as this kind of origin spirit was perfected tens of millions of times, it could truly become a treasure spirit with thoughts, intelligence, and emotions. It had all the conditions a living being must have, except for self-awareness. Of course, the difficulty of this process was no less than refining ordinary materials into a magic treasure. The time needed would be even longer. Because of this, if the Heavenly Thunder Master wanted to have a magic treasure, he had to gather the power of all the elders in the sect to refine it. Even when Lei Jiuxiao came, he had to use his avatar to welcome him. But even so, cultivating a divine ability to the point where it could casually produce a origin spirit, almost becoming a life form, was already an extremely profound ability. Lei Jiuxiao wasn't in a hurry to read the book. He casually pointed, and a beam of spiritual light rushed out of his hand and floated toward the Heavenly Thunder Master. The Heavenly Thunder Master also waved his hand, and the spiritual light fell into his hand. With a slight focus, a huge amount of information rushed into his mind from the spiritual light, allowing him to suddenly understand the location of the Thunder Cavern, the method to enter it, and even the condition of the environment within it. After understanding this information, the Heavenly Thunder Master's expression changed greatly. There was an indescribable emotion in his eyes. "Thank you, fellow Taoist. This time I have taken advantage of you." The Heavenly Thunder Master sighed and bowed to Lei Jiuxiao. Previously, he had used some method to find out about the Heavenly Lightning Dong from Lei Zhen. He understood that the Heavenly Lightning Dong was of great significance to the Heavenly Lightning Men. If he could obtain it, it would bring him countless benefits. Thus, he immediately used the cultivation method of the Heavenly Lightning Son of Heaven to exchange for the Heavenly Lightning Dong. But it wasn't until he learned about the environment of the Thunder Cavern that he truly felt how precious it was. He felt how important this Thunder Cavern was to the Heavenly Thunder Master. With this Thunder Cavern, the difficulty of my disciples cultivating the Thunder Son of Heaven will be reduced by at least 10,000 times. I'm afraid that in a few years, I will be able to surpass the Three Gods sect and truly become the #1 sect in the untainted land. This was what the Heavenly Thunder Master was thinking. Lei Jiuxiao chuckled and said, "It's just taking what we need. It doesn't matter who takes advantage and who loses out." With that, he waved the book in his hand and said, "Since the trade has been completed, I won't disturb you any longer. I'll take my leave now." The Heavenly Thunder Master couldn't wait to go to the Spirit Sea and open the Thunder Cavern. Naturally, he couldn't wait for Lei Jiuxiao to say that he wanted to leave. After a few words, he sent Lei Jiuxiao away. Chapter 498. After Lei Jiuxiao left the Heavenly Thunder Mountain in a streak of light, the Heavenly Thunder Sect Master gathered his disciples and gave them some instructions. Then, he and the many elders' clones took the true disciples away from the mountain range on their flying magic tools. Clearly, he was eager to see the Heavenly Thunder Mountain. Let's not talk about him. After Lei Jiuxiao left the Heavenly Thunder Mountain, he flew about 15 million kilometers to the west and arrived 500 kilometers above a mountain range. He stopped and revealed himself. The current untainted land was completely different from what he had seen more than 3,000 years ago. This could be felt from the 30 million kilometers of journey he had just traversed, as well as the long journey from the Spirit Sea to the Sky Thunder Mountain. The boundless, tyrannical, and earth-shattering vitality made Lei Jiuxiao feel extremely unfamiliar, but he also felt an indescribable excitement. At this moment, the mountain range beneath his feet was far less dense than the Heavenly Thunder Mountain in terms of both Khanate Vitality Qi and Hun Chaotic Vitality Qi. However, there was what Lei Jiuxiao wanted in this mountain range, a group of wind beasts. Ever since the great tribulation of heaven and earth, the untainted land had been filled with boundless vitality. Naturally, countless strange beasts with all kinds of special abilities and innate magical abilities were born. Among them were the 8 great Khanate lightning beasts, as well as various other types of beasts. Living in this mountain range were a group of Khanate wind beasts that were on the same level as the Khanate lightning beast. However, they had different innate magical abilities. These Khanate wind beasts were shaped like wild boars. They were fat, short, and had long ears. They were born with the ability to control the giant boar divine wind. They were also extremely powerful beasts. Lei Jiuxiao hovered in the void, his eyes flashing with faint lightning as he looked down. The entire mountain range within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers was clearly seen by him, as if he were looking at the lines on the palm of his hand. He instantly knew which parts of the mountain range attracted the most wind, which parts attracted the least wind, which parts had the most connate vitality chi, and which parts had the denser Hun chaotic vitality chi. With a thought, Lei Jiuxiao pressed his body down and soon landed on a mountain that was only 30,000 feet tall. This was a place where there were still some remnants of Hun chaotic yuan qi, and it was also the location of the largest group of gale beasts. The entire mountain was surrounded by a faint white mist, as if there were countless tiny particles piled up, illuminating the entire mountain until it was faintly discernible, like a celestial mountain paradise. Ordinary beings might mistake this white mist for condensed water vapor, but Lei Jiuxiao only needed a glance to know that this white mist was condensed from the purest giant capsule divine wind that contained boundless power. It was a powerful defensive layer formed by the natural breathing of the Zephyr Mountain dwellers. If any blood-red body crashed into this white mist without any defense, it would only take an instant for it to be reduced to the size of a speck of dust. Their bodies would be destroyed and their Tao would vanish. Of course, this was as good as nothing to Lei Jiuxiao. The weak aura emanating from his body was enough to isolate the giant capsule divine wind, preventing it from approaching within 30 feet of him. Landing on the mountain peak, the white mist condensed from the giant capsule divine wind was very thin. Occasionally there would be a trace of it, but it would disappear without a trace after being stirred by the connate vitality chi. The mountain peak was naturally simple and unadorned, but it was not barren. Instead, it was filled with ancient trees and green grass, showing off a thriving vitality. Everything in the world had to reinforce and restrain each other. Although the giant capsule divine wind had piled up around the mountain peak and occasionally touched the mountain itself, destroying all ordinary plants, this was the primordial world, after all. There were all kinds of plants that did not fear the giant capsule divine wind that could grow on this mountain peak. The changes over the past thousands of years had even produced some plants that could use the giant capsule divine wind as nourishment, allowing them to grow exceptionally lush. Lei Jiuxiao casually made a grabbing motion, and several towering ancient trees on the mountaintop shook violently before transforming into countless wooden planks. Like building blocks, they instantly formed a fully furnished wooden house with a radius of 100 feet around him, divided into several rooms, and divided into several rooms. The moment the wooden house took shape, the faint giant capsule divine wind in the surroundings quickly gathered. Wisps of white mist flowed into the wooden house like rivers flowing into the sea. They gradually fused with the wooden house, causing it to turn white, as if it was made of white jade. The patterns on the wooden blocks seemed to contain some kind of indescribable mystery, some kind of law of the world, and they resonated with some kind of indescribable existence. The proportion and structure of the hut also contained some kind of indescribable truth, causing the entire hut to be strengthened by some kind of supreme power, as if no power could damage it. Lei Jiuxiao smiled and sat down on the brick bed. With a wave of his hand, the book he had stored into the void of lightning appeared in his hand. The void of lightning was a kind of storage space that Lei Jiuxiao had refined over the years. It was no different from the world in the palm, the sun and moon in the chest, and the universe in the sleeve. It was just that with the body of the lightning spirit, it was easier for him to use it, and the space he could open was even larger. On the cover of this book, there were these 4 complicated and profound Pangu characters. Flipping open the book was filled with countless words, diagrams, talismans, and formations. Although the entire book only recorded one cultivation method, it was all-encompassing, and could even be divided into 8 equally profound and abnormal deities? The cultivation method of the Great Tao. Lei Jiuxiao was Luo Fan's disciple and had received Luo Fan's true teachings. His vision was naturally not that of an ordinary connate god. In the eyes of other living beings, even the heavenly Thunder Lord, this cultivation method was extremely complicated. It would take thousands of years before one could even comprehend it. However, to Lei Jiuxiao, He only needed to read it once to instantly understand the true essence of this cultivation method. I see, no wonder it's so profound. After flipping through the book, Lei Jiuxiao's eyes shone with faint joy and an indescribable light of enlightenment. With a slight thought, boundless lightning was born from the wooden house and quickly gathered towards him. The lightning wasn't simple, but divided into 8 types, each containing endless power and indescribable mysteries. These were the 8 types of innate lightning that the 8 great lightning beasts could innately control. The 8 innate godly thunders weaved together 3 feet away from Lei Jiuxiao, like a cloth woven by threads. They rapidly moved back and forth, and in a short while, they degenerated into a glowing cocoon of light that contained boundless might. Wind and lightning coexist, just as I thought. This thought flashed through Lei Jiuxiao's mind. Chapter 499. These godly thunders were created by Lei Jiuxiao with the help of the ancient wood growing in the giant capsule divine wind after he comprehended the cultivation method of the Son of Heaven's lightning. Wind and lightning were born together. This was one of the most basic laws of the primitive world. The giant capsule godly wind was an extremely mysterious type of wind that was born with an unimaginable degree of compatibility with lightning. Otherwise, Zhao Feng, who was born with the ability to control the giant capsule godly wind, would not have appeared in this mountain range so close to the 8 innate lightning beasts. This quality of the giant capsule divine wind was the most important reason why Lei Jiuxiao had chosen to stay here. After the 8 types of natural lightning formed a cocoon of light in front of Lei Jiuxiao, the godly thunder emitted from the wooden house did not stop at all. Instead, like a dam that had collapsed, the speed at which the godly thunder seeped out increased by countless times. Billions of lightning bolts instantly enveloped the entire space within the wooden house, leaving not a single crack in the wooden house. It was as if it had turned into a world of lightning. Lei Jiuxiao was a lightning spirit. When he passed through the heavenly tribulation, he had wandered through the true meaning of lightning hidden within the supreme great Tao. Although the boundless godly thunder had unlimited power and enveloped the entire space within the wooden house, it was like water to a fish to him. As he breathed, the godly thunder spirit continuously swallowed and exhaled without causing the slightest bit of damage to his body. Instead, it tempered his body, allowing his lightning spirit body to continuously increase its affinity with the godly thunder spirit's essence. As the endless thunderbolts surged out, the wooden house that was built from the ancient wood did not shrink at all. Instead, it appeared to be even purer and more firm. The white jade-like color became even more crystal clear, as though the continuous surging of the thunderbolts was beneficial to it. This was the truth. Wind and thunder were born together. Since there was godly thunder, the godly thunder that was born would naturally strengthen the giant capsule divine wind within the ancient wood, making the ancient wood even more resilient and smooth. This process continued for a full 10 days and 10 nights. After 10 days and 10 nights, the light emitted by the heavenly thunder was as bright as the sun, illuminating the peak of the mountain. It even shone through the white mist formed by the heavenly wind, making it seem as if the white mist did not exist. This process was like the ordinary mist meeting the sun. The light cocoon floating in front of Lei Jiuxiao was so bright that even Lei Jiuxiao found it a little dazzling. As for the 8 types of divine lightning, they had already become indistinguishable a few days ago. On the cocoon of light, the threads formed by divine lightning constantly shuttled back and forth, constantly changing and twisting. In the end, they turned into countless extremely thin but unimaginably complicated talismans. These talismans seemed to have come to life, constantly hovering on the surface of the light cocoon, as if there were countless strange creatures living in a miniature world. There was even a faint spiritual vigor that was constantly emitting from it. The combination of these countless microscopic talismans caused the entire cocoon of light to expand and contract, as if it was a heart that was beating non-stop. It's time. Lightning flashed rapidly in Lei Jiuxiao's eyes, as if the lightning that had been brewing for 10 days and 10 nights was about to strike down with a loud bang, destroying the entire void and the entire world. Then, he raised his hand and suddenly pointed at the light cocoon in front of him. With this point of his finger, the light cocoon suddenly shook. At the same time, the 8 types of godly thunder that had been constantly emitting from the wooden house and rushing into the light cocoon for 10 days and 10 nights suddenly paused and instantly stopped. Although the godly thunder had stopped surging out, the light that enveloped the entire mountain like the sun still existed. It even became even more dazzling because of the premonition of a drastic change, and the area it covered was several times wider than before. The area of effect spanned tens of thousands of miles, directly enveloping the mountain next to it. Roar! A beastly roar that was filled with boundless majesty and fury suddenly erupted from a mountain peak that was also 300,000 feet tall. It was a mountain peak that was also 300,000 feet tall. After this roar, thousands of roars of the same species that were countless times less majestic rang out. They combined with the energy fluctuations from the first roar and formed countless rice-sized white granules. They wrapped around the mountain like a tornado and rapidly spread, sweeping towards the mountain that Lei Jiuxiao was currently on. When Lei Jiuxiao heard this roar, he immediately knew that it was the wind-beckoning king's roar. Although he had been condensing the 8 types of godly thunder to cultivate the lightning emperor's clone over the past 10 days and 10 nights, he still had a portion of his attention to pay attention to the changes in the wind-beckoning king. In fact, a day after he condensed the godly thunder, the wind-beckoning kings on the mountain had sensed the power of the godly thunder on the mountain and knew how powerful Lei Jiuxiao was. As a result, they had moved to the mountain next to him. The reason for this was because there was a wind-beckoning king among the wind-beckoning kings. It was because of the wind-beckoning king that the wind-beckoning kings, who were not very intelligent, could avoid danger. They would not attack recklessly just because Lei Jiuxiao had invaded their territory. However, although the wind-beckoning king had the power of an itinerant immortal, it was still only a wind-beckoning king. Even if it was much more intelligent than normal wind-beckoning kings, it was still very simple and stupid. It could not compare to a real cultivator. As a result, when the godly thunder grew several times brighter and enveloped the mountain they were moving to, the wind-beckoning king finally could not hold it in any longer. It directly erupted with its power and gathered many wind-beckoning kings' innate abilities to attack Lei Jiuxiao with its roar. You finally couldn't hold it in any longer. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Lei Jiuxiao smiled. At this moment, the cocoon of light trembled, and countless spiderweb-like cracks appeared on it. The moment these cracks appeared, the countless talismans that had been living on the surface of the light cocoon like living beings were like flies that had found a crack. They crazily burrowed into the cracks that had appeared, as if there was something inside that had infinite attraction to them. After the cracks appeared, they began to spread rapidly. In just an instant they covered every inch of the surface of the cocoon of light. And in that instant the countless talismans on the cocoon of light had completely disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only the brilliance of the lightning, which did not exist other than the cracks. An increasingly powerful pressure began to appear within the cocoon of light. The surrounding space seemed to tremble slightly, as if the entire world was cheering for the thing that was about to break out of the cocoon of light and change. Chapter 500. At the same time, strands of lightning suddenly appeared out of thin air, completely enveloping the mountain like smoke. The mountain that was originally shrouded in white mist was now shrouded in faint purple mist. Moreover, because the color of the mist was very similar to the color of the lightning, it greatly increased the presence of the mist, making it even more conspicuous. The moment the mist appeared, it collided with the giant capsule of divine wind that was attached to the roar. Wind and lightning engendering each other was an absolute principle, but it depended on the timing. At this moment, the divine wind contained the will to summon wind and repel all things, so it was naturally impossible for it to continue engendering the lightning summoned by Lei Jiuxiao. The moment the two collided, a powerful tremor spread out from the point of collision. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting apart. Although the giant divine wind seemed to be extremely powerful, like a tornado that could swallow the heavens and devour the earth, it was scattered after all. When it collided with the thunderbolts that were only protecting the mountain, the result was obvious. In that instant, the giant capsule of divine wind surged down like a waterfall, but it seemed to have collided with an extremely sturdy reef. It was directly split in two. Although its power was even more astonishing, it did no damage to the mountain at all. Of course, the lightning that Lei Jiuxiao had summoned also suffered great losses during this process. It was evident that the purple mist had become much thinner. However, Lei Jiuxiao didn't care about the giant capsule of divine wind at all. He wasn't surprised or pleased by this result at all. This was because the changes in front of him had reached the most critical moment. It was also the moment when the result would be revealed. Lightning of the world, enter my jar. Two leisurely yells suddenly came from the light cocoon that had been shattered into countless fragments and could only barely maintain the shape of a light cocoon under the cracks. As the long ean spread out, the lightning that had been barely able to maintain the shape of the light cocoon suddenly collapsed and was instantly cast into a figure that appeared within the light cocoon. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace, revealing a figure that gave off the boundless pressure of a king, as if he could control everything in the world. The moment this figure appeared, the dazzling light that covered the sky and covered the earth like the setting sun suddenly disappeared without a trace. The peak of this mountain had become as ordinary as it had been for thousands of years. The only difference was that there were fewer ancient trees and an additional wooden house. After that, the figure nodded at Lei Jiuxiao. It was as if he was standing in the center of the world, and the entire world revolved around him. Lei Jiuxiao looked at the figure, his face full of admiration. As expected of the son of lightning. Even though he only nodded, I can't help but feel moved to tears. This thought flashed through his mind. The figure before him looked exactly the same as Lei Jiuxiao. Even the clothes he wore were not much different from Lei Jiuxiao's. Just by looking at the surface, it was like looking at the inside and outside of Lei Jiuxiao. There was no difference at all. However, this was only his appearance. The person before him gave off a feeling that was worlds apart from Lei Jiuxiao. The powerful emperor aura that filled this person's surroundings made it seem like he was the center of the universe, the center of the world, and everything in the world had to move according to his will. This aura completely distinguished him from Lei Jiuxiao. No living being would associate the two of them together unless they saw them at the same time. They would not think that they had anything in common at all. This was the son of lightning. It was also a clone that Lei Jiuxiao had cultivated in the past 10 days after comprehending the cultivation method of the body of lightning son of lightning. It was very natural for Lei Jiuxiao to make such a choice. After all, the Tao fruit that he cultivated was the most exquisite cultivation method in the world, the one that was most compatible with the Tao. As long as he continued to cultivate according to it, he wouldn't dare to say that he would be able to smoothly attain the Tao fruit of Hun Yuan, but at the very least, it would be thousands of times better than cultivating other cultivation methods. Under such circumstances, he naturally could not give up on this path to heaven and choose a cultivation method like the son of lightning that had an uncertain future. Even the cultivation method above the perfected immortal realm was still being sought. Condensing a clone to cultivate the cultivation method of the lightning son of heaven's body would not affect Lei Jiuxiao's own cultivation, but it would allow him to grasp the essence of the lightning son of heaven's body more perfectly. This was naturally the best choice. As for the method of condensing a clone, it was no different from cabbages on the street for Lei Jiuxiao, who had obtained the true teachings of Luo Fan. He could casually take out more than a dozen of them, and each of them was 100 times more profound than the clone technique that the Lord of Lightning used. After sensing it slightly, the endless power contained in the body of the Son of Lightning was instantly absorbed into his mind. The control of the body of the Son of Lightning over the world was completely different from his own lightning spirit body, as well as the various lightning abilities and techniques that he used. It was a completely instinctive action that did not require any thought or effort. All it took was a single thought, and it would naturally obtain the response of the thunder and lightning of the world. Naturally, there would be a kind of control over the thunder and lightning. Lei Jiuxiao's knowledge was many times greater than that of the Lord of Lightning and the others. As soon as he sensed the characteristics of the body of the Son of Lightning, he knew that this kind of control was already quite close to the embryonic form of verbal compliance law. However, this embryonic form of verbal compliance law only targeted lightning. I didn't expect the essence of the body of the Son of Lightning to be even more profound than I imagined. Lei Jiuxiao could not help but exclaim in admiration. Although this kind of verbal compliance law was very simple and crude, it was already an ability that could only be possessed by those who had seen the Tai Dao fruit in advance. It was not an ability that ordinary Tai immortals could grasp. Cultivators who did not cultivate the Dao fruit but broke through to the golden immortal realm were Tai immortals. They were divided into Tai unaffiliated immortals, Tai true immortals, and Tai unaffiliated immortals. They were fundamentally different from the 3 digits of Tai Dao fruit. With this understanding, Lei Jiuxiao valued the cultivation method of the body of the Son of Lightning even more. At this moment, an incomparably loud and powerful roar came from the outside. An incomparably loud roar filled with intense pressure brought along an even more intense, shocking, and mighty giant mammoth divine wind that pressed down on the mountain peak. The cloud-like lightning around the mountain peak caused the entire mountain peak to tremble as well. I just happened to need you guys to study it. Lei Jiuxiao smiled. With a thought, the clone of the Son of Lightning expressionlessly took a step forward. With a flash of lightning, it disappeared from the wooden house. Chapter 501. When the lightning Son of Heaven clone appeared again, he was already outside the mountain, in front of the huge tornado formed by the giant capsule divine wind. After leaving Lei Jiuxiao's side, the lightning Son of Heaven clone's aura suddenly increased by more than 1,000,000 times. The aura of an emperor that could control everything in the world was so strong that it was almost tangible. In the blink of an eye, there seemed to be endless golden light bursting out from the lightning Son of Heaven's clone, enough to blind one's eyes. This powerful aura was many times stronger than Lei Jin, who had cultivated the thunderbolt Son of Heaven's body. The lightning Son of Heaven clone did not need to wear any yellow robes to show the fact that he was an emperor. Naturally, he did not need the emperor's throne or emperor's seal. He floated in the void and lightning flashed in his eyes. In the core of the giant capsule divine wind, a lightning bolt as thin as a thumb suddenly appeared out of nowhere. This thunderbolt was condensed to the limit, so pure that it even expelled all the innate yuan qi within a radius of several hundred feet, turning the area around it into a vacuum zone that was completely devoid of yuan qi and energy. After the lightning bolt formed, it suddenly twisted and shook like a living thing. It let out a cry that clearly existed, but no living being could hear. It suddenly drilled down and circled around an arc that was clearly not something that a living being could make. With a sleek and lively feeling, it drilled into the mountain in the center of the tornado. As the lightning bolt drilled in like a living thing, the wind-beckoning king's endless roars suddenly stopped. Even though this gigantic divine wind tornado was created by tens of thousands of innate gods, it was so powerful that it even enveloped the entire mountain where Lei Jiuxiao resided. The power that was gathered came from the many wind-beckoning monarchs. However, the wind-beckoning monarch was the leader, after all. It was only because of the existence of the wind-beckoning monarch that it could gather such power and erupt with unimaginable might. At this moment, the wind-beckoning king's roar suddenly stopped. The core that condensed all the beckoning winds into one naturally disappeared. After losing its core, the tornado that was formed from countless wind-summoning divine abilities split into countless parts and collapsed. Even though it was barely condensed into the shape of a tornado, its cohesiveness, its destructive power, and its power that could devour and annihilate all matter had weakened by countless times. At this moment, the tornado could only sweep up a rock the size of a house at most. For Lei Jiuxiao and the lightning son of heaven clone, they didn't even need to defend themselves to avoid all damage. Boom! The wind-beckoning king let out another loud roar. However, this roar was no longer filled with anger like before, wanting to gather all the power to counterattack Lei Jiuxiao. Instead, it was mixed with endless fear and panic. It was as if it had encountered something unbelievable, something that could kill it. As time passed, the tornado formed by the giant capsule god wind dissipated more and more. Coupled with the fact that the beckoning winds had lost the wind-beckoning king's control, their roars became louder and louder. In the end, the boundless giant capsule god wind gradually disappeared. The roar also gradually weakened due to the disappearance of its power. In the end, it disappeared without a trace. This process lasted for a quarter of an hour. The lightning son of heaven clone floated in the air quietly for 15 minutes. During this process, his expression was extremely calm. Even his gaze didn't move at all. It was as if he only needed to take action and the outcome would be decided. There was no need for him to think about it at all, nor was there a need for him to take action again. 15 minutes later, a bolt of lightning charged out of the mountain like it was alive, heading straight for the lightning son of heaven. Although the lightning was only the size of a thumb and was long, it looked no different from ordinary lightning on the surface. However, it gave off the feeling that it had eyebrows and eyes, as if it was a real creature. Although the lightning looked ordinary as it charged out, it gave off a lively aura like a thief that had succeeded and was retreating. It was extremely mysterious. As the lightning charged out, the beckoning wind's roars that occasionally existed in the mountain suddenly grew louder. They were filled with anxiety, fear, panic, and anger from losing something precious. At this moment, the bolt of lightning had already arrived in front of the Son of Thunder's clone. It spun around, and like a living creature spitting something out, it began to bulge from the center and gradually moved forward. Finally, with a poof, it turned into a pig-shaped beast that was 100 feet tall and had 2 big ears like men's boards. It was a beckoning wind. After the lightning spat out the beckoning wind, it suddenly collapsed and disappeared into the air. From the moment the lightning appeared to its disappearance, the lightning son of heaven clone's eyes only flashed slightly. It did not even make the slightest movement. It was like a high and mighty emperor only needed a slight change in his gaze, and there would be countless people trying to figure out what the emperor was thinking. The beckoning wind that was caught by the lightning that had already developed consciousness was the king of the group of beckoning wind. It was the beckoning wind king that had provoked Lei Jiuxiao and unleashed its ability to attack Lei Jiuxiao. After the wind king appeared, it was as if it was being suppressed by an indescribable force. It floated in the air, its body trembling uncontrollably. Its eyes were filled with fear, and its 2 ears were pressed tightly against its body. It was as if all its strength had been sucked away. It didn't dare to move at all. It didn't even dare to look at the Son of Thunder's doppelganger. The lightning son of heaven clone did not move at all, nor did it release any power. It merely looked at the beckoning wind king indifferently, yet the beckoning wind king had already been suppressed to such a state by its aura. The beckoning wind king was a king of the group of beckoning wind kings, controlling the lives and deaths of countless beckoning wind kings and everything within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. However, the beckoning wind king's so-called king status was worlds apart from the lightning son of heaven, a supreme existence that controlled all lightning in the primordial world. The lightning son of heaven clone was not surprised by this change at all. He could not even be bothered to give any instructions. He glanced at the beckoning Wind King, turned his head, and took a step forward, disappearing into the air. When the beckoning Wind King was glanced at by the lightning son of heaven clone, its body trembled violently again. It was as if a wave of power had suddenly appeared in its body out of nowhere. The fear in its eyes became even more intense, but it did not dare to be careless. It hurriedly flapped its ears, and a huge divine wind was produced behind its ears. It dragged its body quickly towards the peak of the mountain where Lei Jiuxiao was. Before long, it landed in front of the wooden hut. It seemed to have received an order from the lightning son of heaven clone. Don't be afraid. Although you can't withstand the lightning son of heaven's aura now, if I use the cultivation method of the lightning son of heaven's body to create the cultivation method of the wind son of heaven's body for you, you won't be afraid of this aura anymore. At this moment, a melodious and indifferent voice rang out in the Wind King's ears. It made the Wind King feel as if a clear stream had flowed through its body, allowing it to recover from the pressure from the Thunderbolt Heaven Son's clone's aura. Chapter 502. Son of Heaven Feng, middle, Lei Jiuxiao was a thunder spirit. Even though he had never cultivated, he was born with an incomparable affinity to the thunderbolts of heaven and earth. Moreover, he cultivated the Tao fruit Great Tao and obtained the true teachings of Luo Fan. His understanding of cultivation methods was tens of thousands of times greater than that of ordinary innate gods. Under such circumstances, he could reach or even surpass the level of the creator of the cultivation method just by looking at the cultivation method of the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven. He directly transcended the appearance of thunderbolts and went deep into the essence of the Son of Heaven. This was also the reason why he could cultivate the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven clone with the help of the clone cultivation method. It was precisely because he had a deep understanding of the essence of the Son of Heaven in the cultivation method of the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven cultivation method that he completely understood the countless mysterious and complicated changes that occurred during the process of combining the 8 primordial thunder beasts to form the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven clone. This made it possible to duplicate the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven clone. Under such circumstances, the cultivation method of the Thunderbolt Son of Heaven clone appeared in Lei Jiuxiao's mind vaguely. In the process of rushing to the mountain gate of the Heavenly Thunder sect with Lei Jin, Lei Jiuxiao had already learned about the characteristics of many special beasts in the untainted world. Zhaofeng was an innate wind beast, which was at the same level as the foundation of the Heavenly Thunder sect, the innate thunder beast. It could even be said that other than the innate magic skills that they mastered, they were extremely similar in all aspects. Under such circumstances, their understanding of the innate wind beast was naturally far greater than that of other innate gods. Therefore, Lei Jiuxiao also learned about the innate wind beast from Lei Jin. In the untainted world, there were 6 innate thunder beasts, namely Zhaofeng, Luin, Miao Miao, and Wangong. Each of the 6 innate wind beasts controlled a type of innate divine wind, just like the 8 innate thunder beasts controlled a type of innate divine thunder. The 6 innate wind beasts and the 8 innate thunder beasts were similar in nature, so the innate wind beasts could also use the essence of the Son of Heaven to combine the bodies of the 6 innate wind beasts to become the supreme body of Son of Heaven clone, which could control all astral winds and divine wind in the untainted world. Of course, this was only a possibility at the root. After all, Lei Jiuxiao wasn't a supreme existence like Luo Fan, who had inherited Pangu's origin spirit and possessed countless abilities and techniques in his memories. Even though he'd gained a thorough understanding of the essence of the Son of Heaven from the cultivation technique of the Lightning Son of Heaven, his knowledge of the 6 innate wind beasts was limited to their names, appearances, and innate abilities. He didn't know anything about the structure of the 6 innate wind beasts' bodies or the various internal mechanisms. Under such circumstances, it was still an impossible task for him to create a cultivation method for the body of Emperor Wind. He could only spend a lot of time studying the 6 innate wind beasts and completely grasp the nature of each innate wind beast. Only then could he truly wrap the nature of the Emperor with the appearance of the wind and create a cultivation method for the body of Emperor Wind. After all, the Wind Beckoning King was many times more intelligent than ordinary Wind Beckoning Kings. Even though it couldn't be compared to a living being that possessed complete intelligence, it had reached a level where it could understand the pros and cons of the situation. It knew what Lei Jiuxiao's words meant to it. Under such circumstances, the Wind Beckoning King's eyes were suddenly filled with indescribable surprise and joy when it heard Lei Jiuxiao's words. His entire body was no longer trembling. He stood up and let out a few coo-coo sounds. This kind of sound was no longer filled with anger and majesty like before. Instead, it was incomparably docile, as if it was trying to curry favor and flatter. Lei Jiuxiao smiled when he saw the Wind Beckoning King's reaction. "Come over here." The Wind Beckoning King didn't hesitate at all. It hurriedly ran over and looked at Lei Jiuxiao with its round eyes that were filled with endless hope. Lei Jiuxiao paid no heed to the Wind Beckoning King's gaze. He casually grabbed out, and an invisible force pulled the Wind Beckoning King into the air. It only stopped when the Wind Beckoning King's body was at the same height as Lei Jiuxiao's line of sight. Following that, millions of invisible lightning bolts suddenly appeared in the air above the lightning in Lei Jiuxiao's eyes. They formed a dense lightning net that wrapped around the Wind Beckoning King's body, turning it into a huge lightning bore. The Wind Beckoning King showed fear in its eyes as it was wrapped up by the lightning net. However, there was no telling if it was because it trusted Lei Jiuxiao completely, or if it knew that it couldn't break free no matter how it struggled, but it remained motionless within the lightning net. It was just that its eyes were darting around. After the lightning net wrapped around the Wind Heralding King, it shook and suddenly burrowed into the Wind Heralding King's apertures. In an instant, the Wind Heralding King's body was illuminated from inside out. One could see countless bolts of lightning roaming within his body with the naked eye. The Wind Beckoning King seemed to feel endless pain. Its entire body trembled violently. The trembling affected every muscle, inch, and hair on its body. Its eyes were filled with indescribable fear. It opened its mouth as if it wanted to roar, but it couldn't. With a thought from Lei Jiuxiao, the endless lightning bolts entered the Wind Beckoning King's acupoints again and entered the air, disappearing without a trace. "I see." After the lightning disappeared, he closed his eyes and a thought quickly flashed through his mind. After a long while, he opened his eyes and pointed casually. A ray of light rushed out of his hand and pierced through the air, entering the Wind Beckoning King's forehead. As the spiritual light entered, the exhausted Wind Summoning King, who was paralyzed in the air, suddenly woke up as if he had been electrocuted. His eyes widened as if they were going to fall out of their socket. At the same time, endless words, diagrams, runes, and talismans flowed through the Wind Beckoning King's eyes like a waterfall. As the information flowed like a waterfall, the Wind Beckoning King's body twisted and trembled subconsciously. This process lasted for 2 hours. 2 hours later, all the phenomena disappeared. The Wind Beckoning King regained control of his body. However, after regaining control of his body, the Wind Beckoning King didn't return to his original form immediately. Instead, he spread his body and his 2 ears suddenly swelled up. Like 2 fans that were growing and expanding, they suddenly expanded in all directions. In the blink of an eye, they had expanded to a radius of 1,000 meters. Like a sky curtain, they completely concealed everything in front of Lei Jiuxiao. After the 2 ears expanded to such an extent, they began to tremble violently in a mysterious and unpredictable way. This trembling triggered some kind of unfathomable power, causing some kind of unfathomable existence in the air to quickly gather towards the Wind Beckoning King. The white mist-like giant capsule divine wind began to spread in all directions with the 2 huge ears as the source. Gradually, it enveloped the entire mountain, causing the white mist that had originally disappeared to disperse once more. Moreover, it quickly surpassed the previous white mist, becoming tens of thousands of times thicker than before. It almost condensed into a liquid state, rippling at the top of the mountain like a white ocean. Although Lei Jiuxiao was dozens of feet away from the Wind King, he had already attained the fruit of the earthly immortal Tao and was only half a step away from the realm of true immortals. There was an invisible and mysterious power protecting him at all times. Although the endless giant phantasmal divine wind was extremely powerful and could obliterate all physical matter, it could not break through the protection of this mysterious power. When it was 3 feet away from his body, it naturally parted to 2 sides and floated in all directions, naturally bypassing his body and not causing the slightest damage to his body. Lei Jiuxiao's eyes flashed with lightning as he looked at the wind-beckoning king's transformation. He nodded slightly. Although my spiritual sense and intelligence are a little lacking, I should be able to cultivate this body of wind-beckoning cultivation method. Such thoughts flashed through Lei Jiuxiao's mind. Although Lei Jiuxiao wanted to create a cultivation method for the body of Wind Emperor and even had a rough understanding of the essence of this cultivation method, he had only seen the beckoning wind among the 6 connate wind beasts. He had never seen the other wind beasts, so he naturally couldn't directly create a cultivation method for the body of Wind Emperor. At this moment, the cultivation method that he injected into the depths of the wind-beckoning king's spiritual sense was only one of the 6 cultivation methods that formed the body of Son of Heaven Feng that he had created based on his research on the body structure of the wind-beckoning king. It was only the cultivation method of the wind-beckoning body. The wind-beckoning king was the king of the wind-beckoning king, so its body structure was naturally the body of wind-beckoning. It didn't need to cultivate the body of wind-beckoning cultivation method to have the connate ability to control the wind-beckoning king's spirit sense. However, it was only controlling this connate ability. If it didn't cultivate this cultivation method, it wouldn't be able to continue cultivating the other connate wind beast cultivation methods, let alone the body of Wind Emperor. Because of this, Lei Jiuxiao made the wind-beckoning king recultivate the body of wind-beckoning cultivation method that he already had. However, this seemingly repeated cultivation method was extremely beneficial to the wind-beckoning king and reached an unimaginable level. Although the Wind-Summoning King was born as the ruler of the Wind-Summoning tribe and possessed unbelievably great power and powerful innate abilities, it was precisely because these powers and abilities were innate that the Wind-Summoning King only knew how these powers and abilities worked, but did not know why they worked. It was just that it could only be used and couldn't derive new abilities or create stronger abilities based on that foundation. The recondensing of the body of wind beckoning gave it a chance to make up for this weakness. Chapter 503. Within the giant divine wind that was as dense as liquid, the wind-beckoning king was constantly undergoing mysterious changes. Its original body suddenly collapsed and turned into countless extremely tiny particles. Under the effect of some mysterious power, it began to reconstruct itself in a meticulous manner. During this process, the extremely dense giant divine wind in the surroundings constantly fused with the countless particles. During this process, it also changed its structure according to the requirements of the cultivation method, making the giant divine wind that had fused with the particles even more profound and wondrous. Lightning flashed through Lei Jiuxiao's eyes. He observed every single detail of the wind-beckoning king's body, including the slightest changes. He had created the cultivation method based on the wind-beckoning king's body structure on the spot. It could be said that the wind-beckoning king was the first living being to cultivate this cultivation method. However, the technique was created based on the wind-heralding king's body after all. Hence, even if there were some imperfections and inaccuracies, it did not affect the wind-heralding king too much. At most, the wind-heralding king would not be able to unleash the greatest power of the avatar of wind. At this moment, Lei Jiuxiao was carefully analyzing the various minute changes that the wind-summoning monarch had undergone in the process of cultivating the wind-summoning physique. He compared it with his own deductions and gradually discovered many problems that he had overlooked before. He had some new ideas about the wind-summoning physique cultivation method. He felt that there was even more room for improvement in this cultivation method. It really was the right choice to let the wind-beckoning king be the first to cultivate this cultivation method. The thought appeared in Lei Jiuxiao's mind out of nowhere. He could not help but smile. 3 days and 3 nights later, the liquid giant divine wind that completely covered the top of the mountain like an ocean seemed to have been sucked away by a black hole. It began to shrink at an unimaginable speed. In just a few dozen breaths, it completely disappeared. Only a thick layer of white mist that could obscure the vision of living beings was left in front of Lei Jiuxiao. The mist churned and trembled slightly. "Open!" A simple and honest voice suddenly rang out from the white mist, causing the wooden hut Lei Jiuxiao had built to sway slightly like a gust of wind that could hurt one's face. Immediately thereafter, the ball of white mist abruptly shuddered before shattering into countless tiny fragments that expanded countless times in size before vanishing into thin air. What appeared was a big man in a white short-sleeved shirt. He had a simple and honest face, large ears, and a somewhat upturned nose. His eyes were slightly dull. It was the wind-summoning king who had already cultivated the wind-summoning body. The cultivation method of the body of wind summoning was created by Lei Jiuxiao. It was part of the cultivation method of the body of Emperor Fengzi. Naturally, it was for the living beings who cultivated this cultivation method to eventually achieve the body of Emperor Fengzi and control all the wind in the primordial world. Therefore, it was impossible for this kind of cultivation method to achieve the summoning wind, which could not be changed in the end. If that was the case, how could the 6 innate wind beasts be merged into one? Of course, it was only possible to freely switch between the innate Taoism body and the body of wind summoning after cultivating it. Therefore, after easily cultivating the body of wind summoning, the wind summoning king could easily switch between the innate Taoism body and the body of wind summoning. What appeared in front of Lei Jiuxiao now was the innate Taoism body that the wind-summoning king had cultivated. After the wind-summoning king appeared, the divine light in its eyes kept changing with the passage of time. The dullness in its eyes gradually weakened, and the liveliness in its eyes gradually increased. In the end, it stabilized at the level of an ordinary person. It was not overly intelligent, but not stupid either. After its eyes stabilized at the level of an ordinary person, the wind-summoning king bowed to Lei Jiuxiao and said, "Thank you, great immortal, for imparting the cultivation method." Just as its eyes showed, after cultivating the wind-summoning body, the wind-summoning king's spiritual consciousness was supplemented by the mysterious effect of the cultivation method. It was originally incomplete, and it was raised to the level of an ordinary person. Its intelligence was also raised to the level of an ordinary person during this process. Only then did it know how to bow. Lei Jiuxiao was the one who created the wind-summoning avatar, so he naturally knew the effects of the cultivation method. He was not surprised by the wind-summoning monarch's reaction at all. He only smiled and said, "There's no need to be so polite. It's a pity that your innate spiritual consciousness is too incomplete. Even after it's been supplemented, you're only an average person. Cultivating the body of wind-summoning king is already close to its limit. It's not enough for you to cultivate the other 5 cultivation methods of the innate wind beast. Looks like you're not fated with the body of Emperor Feng." The wind-summoning king stood up when he heard Lei Jiuxiao's words. He paused for a long time as if he was trying hard to understand what Lei Jiuxiao was saying. Only then did he bow and say, "Great immortal, you're too kind. It's already my great fortune to be able to obtain this cultivation method. I don't dare to hope for too much." It was the first time Lei Jiuxiao had heard the wind-summoning king refer to himself as a little beast, so he felt rather awkward. Suddenly, it seemed as if a bolt of lightning flashed within his mind, and it illuminated his entire mind before instantly vanishing without a trace, causing his mind to once again return to its previous state. I seem to have thought of something just now. Lei Jiuxiao knew that it was definitely something extremely specific and important. If he could figure out what he was thinking of just now, it would be extremely beneficial to his future. It might even affect his future path. This matter was simply too important. It was so important that Lei Jiuxiao had no choice but to do everything he could to search and think about it. As a result, he stood there in a daze. He frowned and did not say anything. Lei Jiuxiao didn't say a word, so the Wind-Caller King naturally didn't dare to disturb him. Fortunately, while he had the intelligence of an ordinary person, he had just gained it after all. He still retained the simple mentality of the Wind-Caller King, so he didn't feel uncomfortable being left out. Instead, he used this time to carefully examine his new body. The more he inspected his body, the happier the Wind-Summoning King was. Compared to the body he had in the past, his current body, whether it was in the state of born Taoism aptitude or the state of wind beckoning, did not have much of an increase in strength. It was not much different from before, and it might even be slightly weaker in the state of born Taoism aptitude. However, correspondingly, his current body was tens of thousands of times more agile than before. That feeling of complete control over one's body, that feeling of being able to move all the power inside and outside of one's body according to one's will, that feeling of being able to exert a power that was 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 times stronger than before caused it to be immersed in it, and it felt as if it had simply lived its entire life in vain. I see. Just as the Wind-Summoning King was carefully inspecting the state of his body, Lei Jiuxiao suddenly exhaled. A smile of sudden realization appeared on his face. Chapter 504. Tribulation of Demons. Top. Lei Jiuxiao's words startled the Wind-Beckoning King. It looked at Lei Jiuxiao in confusion, as if it was trying hard to understand why Lei Jiuxiao would say something like that. Before it could think it through, Lei Jiuxiao smiled and said to the Wind-Beckoning King, "Ever since you cultivated the cultivation method I taught you, you're no longer a beast. You don't have to call yourself a little beast anymore." Then what am I? The Wind-Beckoning King asked honestly. "You are the #1 demon in the primordial world." Lei Jiuxiao chuckled and pointed at the Wind-Beckoning King. As he said this, the space within a radius of several 100 million kilometers suddenly trembled violently. It was as if the world within this area was shaking, and everything was changing because of his words. Although the vibration was limited to a radius of hundreds of millions of miles, the faint fluctuations spread throughout the entire untainted world. Even the endless starry sky above 100,000 miles and the 18 levels of hell below 100,000 miles could clearly sense this inexplicable and mysterious fluctuation. Right at this moment, countless innate gods and postnate living beings with keen senses looked towards Lei Jiuxiao along the inexplicable wave. Although most living beings could not see this location, the primordial world had developed for so many years. After all, there were some connate gods who had cultivated to unbelievably great powers. As a result, a few gazes passed through the endless void and covered the mountain. Lei Jiuxiao sensed this abnormality and was even more certain of his previous thoughts. He ignored the gazes over, nor did he care about the abnormal tremors and mysterious ripples in the primordial world. He only looked at the Wind-Beckoning King quietly, the #1 demon in the primordial world. When the Wind-Beckoning King heard Lei Jiuxiao's words, he instantly felt his entire mind, consciousness, and sea of consciousness being illuminated by an indescribable bolt of lightning that could not be looked at directly. Demon. This word seemed to be just an ordinary Pangu word, but it seemed to condense everything. His past, his present, his future, his descendants, and his endless descendants were all contained in this word. Demon. The wind-beckoning king muttered this word repeatedly. During this process, his eyes became brighter and brighter, more and more dazzling. In the end, it was as if there were two flames burning in his eyes. From today onwards I am a demon. I am the first demon born in the primordial world. Ha ha! Heaven and earth can no longer restrict this demon from obtaining even greater power. Ha ha! After a while, the wind-summoning monarch suddenly burst into laughter. As he laughed, the space within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles shook even more violently. The mysterious waves that spread throughout the entire primordial world became even more intense. The supreme existences who had their eyes fixed on this place were even more shocked. In an instant, almost everyone who sensed the changes there understood that they were witnessing an extremely important historical process in the primordial world. Everything that had happened today would probably be talked about endlessly for generations to come. With this realization, the other existences all watched from the side, not daring to disturb him at all. The wind-summoning king seemed to have broken through some kind of shackles that were imposed by the world. The aura around him was almost unrestrained, and it skyrocketed endlessly. The power in his body surged endlessly like a tidal wave. Endless giant divine wind was naturally born in the void, condensing into white clouds that circled around his body. Under the illumination of the clouds, the wind-summoning king's aura skyrocketed at an even faster speed. All of a sudden, the space within a radius of 1,000,000 miles turned dark. In the sky, a dark cloud suddenly appeared, completely covering an area of 1,000,000 miles. Muffled rumbles kept ringing out from the cloud. An extremely powerful pressure that was enough to make the wind-summoning king lie on the ground and not dare to move came from the cloud. The powerful pressure was even several times more powerful than the pressure released by the Son of Lightning previously. However, in the face of such powerful and shocking pressure, the wind-summoning king's reaction was completely different from before. He laughed loudly, and a crazed look gradually appeared on his face. The power in his body surged endlessly, stirring up the boundless Xiantian Yuan Qi in the surrounding void, and stirring up the endless giant Ho divine wind that was born from the void. It made the top of the mountain seem like it was being ravaged by a tornado, shaking the sky and the earth, as if it was about to be flattened. However, Lei Jiuxiao was at the top of the mountain after all. Even though Lei Jiuxiao had only casually constructed that wooden house, it naturally contained Lei Jiuxiao's comprehension of the grand Tao of heaven and earth, and it had long since fused with the entire mountain. If one wanted to destroy that wooden house, then they would have to destroy the entire mountain. Clearly, the huge commotion caused by the wind-summoning king was not enough to destroy the entire mountain. The power in the wind-summoning king's body began to undergo an extremely subtle and mysterious change as he laughed maniacally and changed his mind. When this change was projected, the giant capsule divine wind, which was like many white clouds, also started to change. It was still the giant divine wind, and it still possessed all the characteristics of the giant divine wind. However, its color and aura began to change. The cloud that was originally as white as snow gradually turned jet black. The natural and pure aura that the giant divine wind originally gave off gradually gained an indescribable unyielding and madness. Following this, the jet-black clouds that spanned millions of kilometers in the void suddenly trembled. Following this, millions of lightning bolts were produced from the jet-black clouds and struck down towards the top of the mountain. Their final target was the wind-summoning king. The wind-summoning king laughed heartily and raised his hand. The giant divine wind that was still changing around him suddenly charged upwards. In an instant, it condensed into a pocket-shaped magic tool 3 feet above his head. The magic tool flickered continuously. From its initial rough embryonic state, when the millions of lightning bolts in the void arrived around the bag and were about to strike it, it flickered 36 times and turned from a rough embryonic magic tool into a magic tool with 36 layers of restrictions. As the magic tool became perfected, An indescribable suction force was suddenly produced from the magic tool, which was also the opening of the bag. The millions of lightning bolts were affected by this suction force and instantly changed their target. They changed from the wind-summoning king that was originally striking down to the bag. In the blink of an eye, a huge funnel seemed to have appeared out of nowhere in the void. Endless lightning bolts that were shining with light followed the huge funnel and shot into the bag in a cone-shaped shape. Soon, they disappeared without a trace. The bag absorbed so much lightning, but it only expanded slightly. Other than that, there were no other changes. The tribulation of demon ascension. Those words suddenly flashed across Lei Jiuxiao's mind as he watched from the side. At the same time, his originally joyful gaze gradually turned solemn. The scene in front of him was clearly the wind-summoning king's tribulation transcendence. This tribulation was naturally caused by the wind-summoning king becoming the #1 demon in the primordial world. Therefore, it could be called the tribulation of demon ascension. However, the strength of the heavenly tribulation far exceeded his imagination. Such a tribulation is not much different from the heavenly tribulation I experienced when I obtained my Tao fruit. Although the wind-summoning king's strength has improved greatly and he understands his own essence, it will probably be difficult for him to survive this tribulation. Lei Jiuxiao secretly calculated. Although the wind-summoning king had easily absorbed the millions of lightning bolts into the magic tool and even used the characteristic of wind and lightning to convert them into the power of the magic tool, that was only the first wave of the heavenly tribulation. Seriously speaking, it was just a test of the heavenly tribulation. According to the width of the tribulation cloud and the strength of the first wave of lightning, it was unknown how terrifying the heavenly tribulation's strength would be in the final stage. According to the strength comparison, it was almost impossible for the wind-summoning king to survive this heavenly tribulation with his current cultivation level. As Lei Jiuxiao pondered, dozens of lightning bolts struck down from the tribulation cloud in the void. Just as he expected, the lightning bolts increased exponentially. By the time Lei Jiuxiao finished thinking, the strength of the lightning bolts was tens of thousands of times stronger than at the beginning. The thunderbolts that blotted out the sky and the earth, the attack that was strong enough to destroy the void and turn everything within a radius of a few hundred miles into nothingness, made those innate gods who were observing this mountain peak from far away with the help of various divine abilities, feel a chill in their hearts. The onlookers were already chilled, but the wind-summoning king, who was enduring the bombardment of the millions of lightning bolts, was still laughing heartily. The magic tool above his head was still absorbing the lightning bolt. It was still using all sorts of mysterious reactions and intricate transformations to convert the lightning bolts into the power of the magic tool. However, compared to the ease with which the first wave of lightning was absorbed, there were no changes after the absorption. At this moment, every time the magic treasure absorbed a wave of lightning, it would shake violently for a long time. It even flickered with light, and its structure was slightly unstable. One could see layers upon layers of restrictions revolving around the magic treasure, doing their best to digest the lightning. It was clearly taking a lot of effort. Lei Jiuxiao sighed inside when he saw this. Although he was only a few dozen meters away from the wind-summoning king, he wasn't affected by the heavenly tribulation at all. He didn't even feel any pressure from it. After all, Lei Jiuxiao was already at the half-step true immortal realm now, and his cultivation was unfathomable. Moreover, the energy in his body was restrained to the extreme and didn't leak at all. Even his aura was faint and practically impossible to sense. Under such circumstances, he was like a rock at the top of the mountain, and it was utterly impossible for his aura to interfere with the heavenly tribulation, so he naturally wouldn't be affected by it.